along North Sea coasts. Further west in the sunshine, well, it's been fine today and it will be again tomorrow. Overnight, still quite a bit of cloud initially this evening over Wales, Northern Ireland, southwest England, but that is edging away. So most places having lengthy clear spells, perhaps some misty conditions over the tops of the Pennines. Enough of a breeze to stop temperatures falling too far, but still it'll feel fairly fresh on Thursday morning with some pockets of frost possible across the hills and mountains of Scotland and northern England. But most towns and cities start about 5 or 6 tomorrow. And we start with plenty of sunshine too. Any mist and low cloud over the Pennines should clear away. The possibility of a bit of mist at times on the eastern side of Scotland, but generally a lot of blue sky around during Thursday. Come the afternoon, it will start to cloud over across East Anglia and the southeast with some outbreaks of rain perhaps pushing in here. But most places dry and bright. Again, that east-west contrast with the temperatures, 11 or 12 at best in the east, whereas further west, 15, 16, maybe 17, 18 in western Scotland, feeling fairly pleasant once more here. Staying fine and clear across Scotland and Northern Ireland on Thursday night. Chance of seeing the aurora, actually. Whereas for England and Wales, a very different picture with cloud and rain spilling in. So quite a difference here on Friday. Much more clouds, some heavy showers possible in the south. And this zone of wetter weather sitting over parts of Lincolnshire, northern England, into the Midlands and into parts of Wales. And we're still with that easterly wind. If you're stuck under that rain, it's going to feel pretty bleak, I suspect, during Friday, with temperatures 10 or 11 at best. Again, western Scotland, top of the temperature tree, 16 or 17 here. Goodbye.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
A very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. I will be with you for the next 3 hours. Here is just a small taste of what I've got coming up this hour. So we are starting with a national emergency. Is it too little too late? Is this an emergency that actually could be very bad news for you? In other news, though, get a load of this. Is the National Lottery actually funding extremist groups? We've done a GB News investigation on this. I'll tell you all about that very shortly. And get a load of this. You will not believe it. There are more than 2,700 people working at your councils around the country on more than 100 grand a year. Any chance of using a bit of that money to fill in that pothole, maybe? I don't know. What do you make of that? And also, as the coronation preparations rock up, we are waiting to see the protests from various Republican groups. Look, I'm asking the question, is it in bad taste? Is it all free speech to say not my king? Or actually, could it be treason? Patrick Christys on GB News. I've got loads more coming your way as well. It looks like the Women's Institute is going to let men into it, which I think defeats the point, doesn't it? And find out why sausage rolls, yes, that's right, sausage rolls could cause a crime wave. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Get your views coming in thick and fast. Now, though, headlines with Aaron.
And good afternoon to you. It's 3 minutes past 3. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has declared shares his wife holds in a childcare agency in a much-delayed list of ministerial interests. He's under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog over claims he didn't properly declare Akshata Murthy's shareholding in Koru Kids, which stands to benefit from measures in the budget. Downing Street claims no rules were broken because Rishi Sunak declared it as a ministerial interest rather than to MPs in the Commons. Before today, though, the ministerial list hadn't been published for almost a year. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak was forced to defend his party's record on public services during Prime Minister's questions. The Labour leader accused him of presiding over a legacy of failure and of living in his own world compared to the rest of us.
People waiting more than 2 days from an ambulance because they broke the NHS. Only 1 in 100 rapists going to court because they broke the criminal justice system. A record number of small boats crossing the Channel because they broke the asylum system. People can't afford their bills, can't get the police to investigate crimes, can't get a doctor's appointment. Does that really sound like pretty good shape to him?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what's the record since 2010? Since 2010, crime down by 50% under the Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. 20,000 more police officers. We've given them more powers, and we've toughened up sentencing. All opposed by Sir Softy over there.
Food prices have risen to a 45-year high, putting further pressure on families struggling with the rising cost of living. Inflation's defied predictions by remaining above 10%. It's largely because of soaring prices for things like bread, milk and eggs, along with clothes and shoes. And that has only partly been offset by cheaper energy. It makes another interest rate rise from the Bank of England next month more likely. The government's plans for an asylum centre are being challenged in the High Court today. Braintree District in Essex argues the proposed site at an RAF Weathersfield base is unsuitable due to its isolated location and lack of capacity for local services. The government says using disused military bases to accommodate migrants will reduce the reliance on hotels. A cabinet minister is warning that Russian hackers are seeking to disrupt or destroy parts of the UK's critical infrastructure. Oliver Dowden's confirmed the National Cyber Security Centre is issuing an official threat notice, and he's unveiled new measures to support businesses on the front line of our cyber defences. Mr Dowden has also said more needs to be done to attract cyber security experts into the civil service.
We have experienced attempted attacks in the past, but these groups operate differently. Instead of seeking to profit or spy on us, their primary motive is to disrupt or destroy our infrastructure. These adversaries are ideologically motivated rather than financially motivated. They're often not controlled by those foreign states. That makes them more opportunistic and less likely to show restraint.
An inquest has ruled the death of a doctor after his AstraZeneca COVID jab was due to unintended complications of the vaccine. The 32-year-old Stephen Wright was an NHS psychologist in South East London. He died from a blood clot to the brain 10 days after his first dose of the vaccine in January 2021. Well, the coroner has described it as a very unusual and deeply tragic case. Labour is accusing the government of denying justice to victims of the infected blood scandal. Between 1970 and 1991, thousands of people were infected with HIV and hepatitis after being given contaminated blood products. Well, in an interim report, the chair of the inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, recommended reparations should be extended to include bereaved parents and children. Well, Cabinet Office Minister Jeremy Quinn told the Commons the government is intensely considering the recommendations. The Unite Unions announced fresh strikes by health workers next month. 2,000 ambulance workers in the south of England and the West Midlands will walk out on May the 2nd, with Unite indicating many of its members are unhappy with the government's latest pay offer. The union has previously announced separate strikes for May the 1st in London and Yorkshire, and both those days coincide with a 48-hour strike held by the Royal College of Nursing. Meanwhile, hundreds of workers from the pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline will also strike in May in a dispute over pay. Unite says 750 of its members will walk out after rejecting a 6% pay offer and a one-off lump sum of £1,300, describing it as significantly below inflation. The company says it's disappointed by the action. And Tesco says it plans to appeal after Lidl won a High Court battle over branding. Lidl argued Tesco's use of a yellow circle in its club card scheme promotions was an infringement of their main store logo. A judge found in favour of Lidl, agreeing it was a violation of their trademark rights and copyright. This is GB News. More as it happens. Now, time for Patrick.
Afternoon all. We're getting stuck straight in today with some big breaking news for you. Let's get cracking. I'm going to go over now to GB News' Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, this has just come through to me here anyway. What's the latest?
Yeah, we're getting an outline from Home Office lawyer here at the Royal Courts of Justice in that challenge against Home Office plans to put asylum seekers into an old RAF base at Wethersfield in Essex Braintree District Council, fighting that and hoping for an injunction. The government claims that it's dealing with effectively a national emergency in dealing with the small boats crisis, and they need to come up with innovative solutions to try to accommodate these asylum seekers. So just in the last few minutes, the lawyer for the Home Office has confirmed that as of last month, 109,000 asylum seekers were in a supported accommodation across the UK, and that included 48,000 being supported in hotel accommodation. Now, they also said, interestingly, in terms of what officials at the Home Office are now planning for in terms of those coming across the English Channel in small boats in the year ahead, they are actively preparing for 56,000 people to cross the English Channel in small boats. Now, not all of those 56,000 will be accommodated in hotels. Some have friends and family that they can be sent off to stay with, but a significant number will. And the estimates that the Home Office have is that between 120 to 140,000 asylum seekers will require supported accommodation in the year ahead, and obviously that's going to put a strain again on the many hundreds of hotels that are being used across the country, and it is precisely why, according to the government lawyer, they need, as a matter of urgency, to secure these sites such as Wethersfield in Essex, Scampton in Lincolnshire, barges down in Dorset and another vessel in Birkenhead, to try to accommodate asylum seekers in much larger groups away from hotels and the strain that that's putting on the hotel industry.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Now, look, this is just coming through to us, so if you are just joining us, I'm just going to repeat some of those figures that Mark has given me there, as I heard them anyway. 109,000 asylum seekers in supported accommodation at the minute, 48,000 in hotels. They are actively preparing the government for 56,000 channel crossings this year, which could lead to around 120 to 140,000 people living in supported accommodation in the year ahead, which is why, Mark, they're so keen to press ahead with this national emergency plan that they've got. And what would that plan mean for the people of Bexhill, for the people of Wethersfield? Does it essentially mean that the government can just ignore their desires and plonk people in sites like these? Because reading between the lines, it means they're preparing for more sites like this to be used, and locals won't have a say.
Yeah, well, the government has effectively a Class Q, it's described as, rule available, which means that if they own government land, so basically a Ministry of Defence base would be a prime example of that. If it's government-owned land, then they, if it's declared a national emergency, under Class Q, they can then circumvent, disregard any planning objections that there might be from councils like Braintree District Council over the suitability of a base like Wethersfield. Now, Braintree District Council claim that that base is unsuitable because there just there isn't the infrastructure in the local area to be able to support up to 1,800 young male asylum seekers, that they are, of course, free to wander into the local community. In Wethersfield itself, the village next to the base, there's one small grocer's shop, and that's it, really. The government, for its part, is arguing that, look, you know, they're not in breach of any planning rules at all. They already have the base. It's theirs. There is already infrastructure on that base, which includes a very significant number of accommodation blocks, and also hard standing that they can put portable porta-cabins or other marquees and other portable buildings up on to deal with significant numbers of people. So they're arguing that there's no breach in the first place, but if there is a breach, well, they can get round that because it's a national emergency, and under this Class Q letter of the law for a national emergency, they can disregard any of these planning objections.
Mark, thank you very, very much for bringing us that big breaking news right at the top here. We'll go back to Mark as and when he gets even more information. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor there, outside the Royal Courts of Justice, where these figures have just been revealed to us by the government. I'm just going to repeat these. I think it's worth noting, isn't it, that 109,000 asylum seekers are currently in supported accommodation. This has just been revealed. 48,000 of those are in hotels. The government is actively preparing for 56,000 channel crossings this year. Yesterday, we did talk about the idea that now there's been 5,000 already, and they are expecting around 120 to 140,000 asylum seekers to be in some form of assisted accommodation by the end of this year. And that is why they want to press ahead with plans to essentially commandeer, anyway, various different government sites, so prisons, former RAF bases. On that note, the government wants to house 1,200 migrants at a former prison in Bexhill in East Sussex, and locals there are planning to stage another protest this evening. Howard Martin is the president of the Bexhill Chamber of Commerce and Tourism and joins me now. Howard, thank you very much. Now, I'm not sure if you could just pick that up there, but we did just drop some big breaking news about the figures of asylum seekers currently in hotels. How do you feel about the government's plans to commandeer your site?
Those figures are just absolutely astounding, aren't they? It's just incredible. Our thoughts go out to the people of Braintree and the small communities around those sites, but at least they've got the politicians who've got the guts to stand up for them. Down here in Bexhill and Little Common, we've been abandoned by our politicians. They've left us to face this on our own. And this site behind me should be an ecological wonderland. Instead, it's going to be an economic disaster for our communities. And our politicians have abandoned us on that.
Now, Howard, any idea that you guys might be able to claim massive economic damage or ecological damage, or potential human rights issues for the people who already live there, public health and safety being the obvious ones? The government doesn't want to listen to you on that. Why should they?
Well, they should, because we have a community that's been starved of investment for, let's be honest, generations. This site stood empty for 10 years, and our council has done nothing, our politicians have done nothing to bring the investment that sites like this around the area really need. We are a town of 46,000 people that recently had our local politicians cancel a hotel development that would have created over 100 jobs. A coastal town of 46,000 people without a hotel. The asylum seekers can't stay in our hotel because we don't have one. That's the kind of economic deprivation that we have been abandoned to. And local businesses have had enough. And this is our fight back. If they use this site, and we hope they don't, we hope that our politicians get the guts to move forwards with a legal action against the use. If they use this site, we want real economic investment. We want real economic value from this use of our town for this purpose.
But is it as simple as putting a migrant base in your town will make everybody who already lives there poorer?
No, not at all. We hope it doesn't. But we want, as the Chamber of Commerce, we want guarantees, we want oversight, we want accountability. We want to make sure that the work being done in here to turn this into a migrant centre is done by local businesses, local tradesmen. We want that economic value bringing into the town, not disappearing up the A21 back to London on every occasion. There will be laundry, there will be catering, there will be psychological services, there will be maintenance, there will be security. That economic value has to be the payback to our town if they're going to put this here. And we want that guaranteed, and we want it accountable from our politicians.
You know what, Howard? That is an absolutely brilliant argument, because I completely understand that the idea of having a migrant centre in a small town is deeply unpalatable to the people of that town for all of the obvious reasons that we've banged on about loads here. But the one way of making that just about OK, I think, for people, is if the government can point it and go, you know what, your local development services, your local psychiatry services, your local food supply services, all of these people, local businesses, will be bang involved in this. And it does actually maybe flip it on its head a bit. Really, the government's got to do that, because if they don't, presumably, it's just a complete lose-lose.
It's a lose-lose all round, because this should be an ecological investment site. This should be part of the Green New Revolution that the government talks about. This site is valuable. It's on the Pevensey levels. We have the medieval town village of North Eye that's as equal value to Stonehenge. We have the maritime conservation area. We should be developing this sympathetically as an eco-tourism destination. Instead, it's being slaughtered by this. So we want guarantees, we want the checks and balances put in place to make sure that the economic value of this, first of all, doesn't go over 1,200 occupants at a time, which actually is, based on the government figures, is 4,800 a year, plus staff, plus all the support services. The sewers here, we already have sewage pumped out on our seafront almost on a weekly basis that they seem incapable of doing anything about. The sewers here were designed for a prison sometime in the 1950s that were designed for 450 prisoners, and that was reduced to 250 prisoners because it was overcrowded. Now they're going to dump into the sewage over 4,000 people a year, 5,000 people a year.
Yeah, look, Howard, thank you very much. And can I just ask as well, I'd really enjoy talking to you again at some point in the coming weeks and months, and it would be great to just follow this story through, really, with you. As Howard Martin there is the president of the Bexhill Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. Look, the bad news, obviously, for him is that the latest government figures that just dropped minutes ago, 109,000 asylum seekers currently in supported accommodation. That's expected to rise to around 120 or 140 by the end of this year. It's not good for places like that, especially when the government declaring a national emergency now looks as though it's going to rip the rights of locals away to complain or protest or legally challenge sites like that being used. Do you worry that that could happen at a site near you? Moving on, GB News has exclusively revealed that lottery money was given to an activist group that hosted a talk calling Boris Johnson and other politicians devils. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
reminder now of the big breaking news that we brought you just moments ago. The government expects 56,000 migrants to arrive in the UK on small boats this year alone. I've got some more figures for you as well that are equally stark. 120 to 140,000 of them expected to be in accommodation this coming year. Bear in mind that 48,000 are already in hotels. So if you were wondering how many there are, those are official government figures, just dropped. 48,000 people currently in hotels and 109,000 asylum seekers currently in supported accommodation as a whole. So there we go. Those are the numbers that I know a lot of people have been wondering about for a very long time. We now have them for you. But we'll have lots more on that throughout the show. Right now, though, it's time for a GB News exclusive, which, again, live here on this show, we do have a fresh update on for you. The National Lottery Heritage Fund has given £250,000 to an activist group that hosted a talk calling various politicians devils. We've got some footage of activist Stafford Smith making the comments at a meeting in Brixton in South London earlier this month.
And this man, this devil, you know Mopac, right? You need to know them my devil is they are devils, and I'm going to show you that they're devils. This woman's called Sophie Linden. She's the Deputy Mayor for Policing. Right.
Just to clarify, that's Stafford Scott, by the way. There we go. And there were some other quite wild accusations being levelled out as well. And it's raised serious questions as to exactly where the National Lottery money is going. I am just going to go over now to our investigative reporter, GB News investigative reporter, Charlie Peters, who joins me in the studio right now. And Charlie, yes, I understand you have an update on all of this.
Yes, so it was this highly charged political content given £250,000 to run this initiative called 81 Acts of Exuberant Defiance to commemorate the 1981 Brixton riots. But the scandal has arisen because some of that money was used to book the Speaker, Stafford Scott. So far, we've gone over some of the political content he used, describing politicians, as we've just heard, as devils. But he also commented on a lot of stuff about the police, describing the government's crackdown on gangs as modern-day fascism. Moreover, we can now reveal that in the 3-hour-long speech, he described the reaction to the Broadwater Farm riot as giving the police a, quote, a bloody good hiding. Now, this is a very severe statement because this actually led to the death of a police officer at the time, PC Blakelock. His murder has not yet been solved. His widow still does not have an understanding of who killed her husband. And Stafford, in the speech a minute later, actually said that the lack of that murder being solved, that murdered police officer, and some of us believe that's justice because when they kill us, nobody goes to prison. So an extremely controversial statement there, saying that the failure to solve a murder is justice.
And this is a group that was given a load of money by the National Lottery.
That's correct. They're given £250,000 to run this initiative to commemorate the 1981 riots. And people could apply for up to £4,000 from that fund to run these events to commemorate the riots and to commemorate the story around it. This speech given by Stafford Scott was called War in a Babylon. It was held earlier this month. Some of the other comments he made, very political, very controversial, also said that the Equalities and Human Rights Commission was set out to hang Jeremy Corbyn over the anti-Semitism scandal. Mr Scott also said that Tories don't give a damn about black kids, so very extreme political messaging. And now we've revealed also those statements on the unsolved murder of a police officer.
Yeah, but this is unbelievable, isn't it? And I mean, does the National Lottery Heritage Fund not do any due diligence when it comes to giving out money to people? I mean, someone who's young and impressionable could be listening to that there and then and thinking that, you know, our police force, it's OK to potentially be violent towards our police, that Boris Johnson, etc., are devils. I mean, good grief, what does that mean that you're able to do to them as well? I mean, I just find this deeply concerning.
There's not a lot of information on how the money was awarded, the process by which it went through, and I'm still seeking to answer that, hopefully through a Freedom of Information request. But what is clear, I think, from what we've seen so far is that a lack of oversight was conducted here. The National Lottery Heritage Fund, when I spoke to them yesterday, did give us a statement, which I think we have now, where they said essentially that the situation was that they reached out to the fund, they'd reached out to the Jubilee Initiative, and they'd have a conversation to see how they would take things further, and they would discuss how the next steps would be taken and the project, how it would be delivered with the cash they've already given there. So, in effect, saying that this fund can continue, this initiative can continue, these 81 acts can continue, even though the content is expressly political. I've followed up with them today, and I hope to get a response later.
Absolutely. Look, Charlie, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the update on that. Charlie Peters, their GB News investigation report. So what do you make of all of that, ladies and gentlemen? I have got loads coming your way between now and 4 o'clock. We will hear live from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is about to give a speech in Belfast. And what have King Charles and the cross used to crucify Jesus Christ got in common? I'm going to read that again, because that's a turn of phrase I never thought I'd use on national television. What have King Charles and the cross used to crucify Jesus Christ got in common? Stay tuned to find out. I've got all that coming your way and much more. Find out again as well why the Women's Institute might be allowed to let men into it. I mean, what is the world coming to? And could sausage rolls, yes, that's right, sausage rolls, really be causing a crime wave? But first, it's your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, it is 3:31. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Some confirmation of that breaking news we brought you in the last hour. A Home Office lawyer has told a court the government is preparing for 56,000 people to arrive in small boats this year. That's up from nearly 46,000 in 2022. The Home Office is currently accommodating 109,000 asylum seekers, 48,000 of those in hotels at a cost of £6.2 million per day. If those figures are correct, it will take the supported population of migrants to between 120 and 140,000. The Prime Minister has declared shares his wife holds in a childcare agency in a much-delayed list of ministerial interests. He's under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Committee over claims he didn't properly declare Akshata Murthy's shareholding in Koru Kids, which stands to benefits from measures in the budget. Downing Street claims no rules were broken because Rishi Sunak declared it as a ministerial interest rather than to MPs in the Commons. The Unite Unions announced fresh strikes by health workers next month. 2,000 ambulance workers in the south of England and the West Midlands will walk out on the 2nd of May. Unite's indicated many are unhappy with the government's latest pay offer. Now, the union has previously announced a separate strike for London and Yorkshire on the 1st of May, and both those days coincide with the 48-hour strike held by the Royal College of Nursing. Hundreds of workers from GlaxoSmithKline, the pharmaceutical giant, will also strike in May over pay. Unite says 750 members will walk out after rejecting a 6% pay offer and a one-off lump sum of £1,300, describing that as significantly below inflation. The company says it's disappointed by the action. And Tesco says it plans to appeal after Lidl won a High Court battle over branding. Lidl argued Tesco's use of a yellow circle in its club card scheme promotions was an infringement of their main store logo. A judge found in favour of Lidl, agreeing it was a violation of their trademark rights and copyright. TV online, DAB and TuneIn Radio. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Quick look at today's markets. The pound buys you $1.2457 and €1.1353. The price of gold, £1,600 and 94 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7895.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, well, I've got a lot coming your way, but I just want to dip into the inbox. I don't think we do that often enough, do we? gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm going to get you to react to that big breaking news we had right at the top with our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's revealed some quite stark figures about channel crossings and the amount of asylum seekers in accommodation. So it does come, by the way, on the day that reports have emerged. We wonder why we've had a national emergency declared. Apparently, we've had welcome signs in Dover to welcome people who have entered this country illegally, and the government is going to replace those signs with little notices that say you have actually entered illegally and you are now in a little bit of trouble. So for a while, supposedly, we were welcoming them in. Yesterday, we spoke about the idea that if they go to Wales, then actually they're going to get around £1,600 a month plus, of course, taxpayer-funded legal aid, which is more than what pensioners get and people who've been paid into the system their whole lives. But those new figures are 109,000 asylum seekers currently in supported accommodation, 48,000 in hotels. They are actively preparing the government for 56,000 channel crossings this year. So that's roughly 51,000 more than we've already had, OK, for the rest of the year. And they are expecting, at the end of the year, to have between 120 and 140,000 in accommodation in the year ahead. And they are using these figures now as the reasoning behind why they need to commandeer various different, already government-owned sites, but ignore locals, please, and actually use them for migrant processing centres and the like. Loads have been getting on. Christine says, hi, Patrick. This migrant issue has become untenable, and this is based on those numbers that we just gave you at the start of the show. We have nowhere to put this number of people on our island, plus the enormous cost to the taxpayer. Christine is now of the view that we should turn the boats back. What do you make of that? I did speak to a former Australian politician a couple of days ago, actually, and what he was saying was that it was deemed deeply unpalatable initially in Australia, but then they did it and the boat stopped, and then when the opposition party got into power, they didn't reverse the policy because it had worked. Of course, there are massive practical issues with doing that, But if we're at the point now of declaring a national emergency and having untenable numbers, what is the next step? But I don't see how we turn the boats back in this country, to be perfectly honest with you, despite what people may indeed want. It's not only the thousands of hotels, though, Chris has been on touch with. It's what happens to the local infrastructure. She's saying that she lives in Bournemouth. They haven't been informed how many thousands we have in local hotels. Well, it's 48,000 nationally, so there you go. I suppose you can maybe do the maths on that. 56,000, Patrick, this is from Stuart. Please explain to me how Rishi Sunak can promise to, quote, stop the boats, yet expect 56,000 again this year. Well, this is the problem, isn't it? That was the only real bit of jeopardy, I think, in Rishi Sunak's big 5 pledges, which was stop the boats, OK? Well, you know, if he doesn't, I suppose his get-out-of-jail card is that potentially the other party is not going to do that either. Look, that was the breaking news. Thank you very much for everyone who's been emailing in. Keep your views coming in. There's loads here, actually. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Just a quick one as well, which is that Rachel's been on. This is about the Women's Institute story. Apparently, the Women's Institute is essentially going to let, men in, transgender women into it, and whether or not this is essentially sacrilege to a long-standing institution. Rachel is pointing out that transsexual women can join the Women's Institute now. Yes, OK, fair enough. But what does all of this mean going forward? Now, a little later in the show, I am going to speak to a Just Stop Oil activist, and I'm going to ask him about something that I think a lot of us are wondering. So do their protests actually amount to terrorism? Let's just take a look at what the Terrorism Act 2000 says. So it defines terrorism, both inside and outside of the UK, as the use or threat of one or more of the actions listed below, and where they are designed to influence the government or international governmental organisations or to intimidate the public. The use or threat must also be, and this is crucial, for the purpose of advancing a political, religious, racial or ideological cause. So do you think Just Stop Oil fits into this? This is what I'm asking. And here are 3 of the examples that they say can amount to terrorism. Serious damage to property, endangering a person's life other than that of the person committing the action, and creating a serious risk to the health or safety of the public or a section of the public. So now that you've seen and heard all of that, that is the definition, according to the Crown Prosecution Service, of terrorism. Do you think that Just Stop Oil and potentially other groups like them fit into that description? No doubt they will have a different view, and I will be talking to them about that later on, so make sure you keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. We have already had eco-activists protesting this week, and now anti-monarchists are promising to target the coronation next month. Good grief. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities. especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
A reminder now of the big breaking news that we brought to you right at the start of this show. The government expects 56,000 migrants to arrive in the UK on small boats this year, and it could lead to up to 140,000 people being in accommodation in this country by the end of the year, as it seeks, obviously, to declare a national emergency and use various different government-owned sites, despite local protests and despite local legal action, to just plough ahead and house these people. What do we make of all of that? Now, moving on, the leader of Britain's largest anti-monarchist group says that more than 1,000 people plan to protest during King Charles's coronation parade. This comes as a YouGov poll shows the majority of the public do not think the coronation should be funded by the taxpayers. GB News' royal reporter, Cameron Walker, joins me now. So there's very much a couple of different sides to this. I'm going to be tackling the protesters element of it a little bit later, but it appears that people don't really want the coronation to be taxpayer funded.
Yeah, 51% of the British population, according to the YouGov poll, which is just over 4,000 respondents. If you look at the age categories, if you are younger, you tend to be more inclined to say, I do not want the British government, i.e. us as British taxpayers, to pay for it. If you're slightly older, then you are more inclined to say, perhaps that, well, there's less people who are saying you should not be funded. Operation Golden Orb, which is this committee which is organising the coronation, thinks that it's going to be around the £100 million mark. Now, if you compare that to 1953, it cost 1.5 million, but in today's money, that's 50 million pounds. So essentially, this coronation that's happening in a few weeks' time is costing double that of Queen Elizabeth II in today's money. Now, a source told The Sun that one of the reasons for that, unfortunately, in 2023, there is a big security concern, much more of a security concern than there was in 1953.
I mean, the irony here potentially could be that those people who are looking to protest at this coronation could be the ones driving up the security costs, which make it more expensive for the taxpayer, even though they think one of their big problems about it is how expensive it is for the taxpayer, which is a bit self-defeating. Before I go back to you, Cameron, I want to nail my colours to the mast on this. I think that the coronation should cost as much as they like it to cost, and the taxpayer should pay for it. It's our king, it's our monarchy. This doesn't happen very often, does it? It is an expose of us to the world, and we should be proud of this. We should be really, really proud of it. But Cameron, yes, protests have been scheduled, haven't they?
There have been scheduled. It's anti-monarchy group Republic who are organising them. They want 1,000 people to protest in Trafalgar Square, which is obviously on the procession route between Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey. Whether they'll get to that number, we'll have to wait and see, but they certainly will have a very loud, noisy but peaceful presence on the coronation ground, on the route even. However, I think we can safely predict that there's going to be a hell of a lot more monarchy supporters along the route, as we saw with Platinum Jubilee celebrations camping out for days.
Yeah, and this is the route. It's a shorter route, obviously. And I did say at the time that I think this is because of those potential security concerns and also the increased cost that would bring to it. So it's a shorter route, really. So it'll be over in a flash. And they're not doing the bigger one, which presumably would have ramped up the cost even more. Look, Cameron, thank you very, very much for all of this. We'll be talking to you a bit later in the show. Cameron Walker there, GB News' royal reporter. Now, later on, I'm going to be talking about Just Stop Oil, OK? And I did read out before about whether or not they fit the CPS's definition of a terrorist organisation. And I want to draw a clear distinction between them and the Republicans who will no doubt be protesting in force, or at least trying to, at the coronation, because there is a key difference there. I think that what Just Stop Oil are doing a lot of the time is criminal damage, is actually actively, massively damaging our economy and is putting lives at risk. And we've seen that evidenced in plain sight by ambulances, despite what they say about a blue light policy, ambulances not being able to get through to hospitals. So all of that stuff is happening, and it is for an ideological cause as well, so it fits all these definitions. When it comes to people who are protesting about the monarchy, I genuinely see that as more of a free speech issue. I think it's distasteful, but that's my view. That's because I'm a fan of the monarchy, OK? I think it's distasteful. I think, it's a bit sad, potentially, really. But I don't really think it's criminal. I'm saying this because I've had a few emails getting in as well, saying, well, is it treason? If Just Stop Oil were matching the definition of a terror group by the CPS, then is it actually treason for people to protest the monarchy? No, it isn't. There is a clear distinction there. Treason, of course, is the crime, I'm reading the definition now, the crime of betraying one's country, especially by attempting to kill or overthrow the sovereign or government, which, fingers crossed, is not what's on any of their minds. So there we go. But yes, I'll be returning to all of that very shortly. But here's a quick question for you, OK? Here's a quick question for you. Do you get value for money from your council? So while the UK copes with the cost of living crisis, a new report has found that a huge number of council employees are being very handsomely rewarded. It's the Town Hall Rich List, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, absolutely. It's that time of year again. And it has revealed that at least 2,759 council employees received more than £100,000 for the 2021 to 2022 financial year. Westminster Council led the way. 50 of their employees got over 100 grand. The highest remunerated person was the managing director of Guildford Council, who received £607,633 in salary, pension contributions and compensation for their loss of office and benefits. And 47 councils failed to publish their accounts in time, meaning the actual number of employees on over £100,000 will no doubt be a lot higher than the report found. Let's just ask now, man of the people, broadcaster, journalist, friend of the channel, Mike Parry, if we are getting value for money from our council fat cats. Mike.
Well, Patrick, thank you very much indeed for inviting me onto your show about this subject. I have a very particular interest in this. When I was a young reporter on the Chester Chronicle, we used to go to the council meetings at the town hall, and councillors weren't paid in those days. The only people who were paid were the very most senior officers of the council, who, to put it in perspective, got about £30,000 a year in those days to look after getting your bins emptied and make sure the lamppost lights worked and all that kind of thing. What's happened is, ever since the era, really, of the kind of Blair government and Gordon Brown as Chancellor, is that they've turned public service into an industry. A massive industry. Some of those figures that you've just related, and I'll repeat a couple as well, which shocked me. Southampton's Sandy Hopkins, 406,000, OK? Robert Steenson from North Lanarkshire, I beg your pardon, Executive Director, 536,000. Now, it used to be a public service where you were happy to serve your community. Councillors didn't get paid. The only pay that councillors got when I worked on the Chester Chronicle was 2 pints of beer to give me the inside story after the council meeting. But it's now become a massive industry. Some reports, Patrick, in recent years have claimed that as much as 1/3 of the council tax that you pay could go towards paying the salaries of the people who work at the council, and more, and this is a problem that's going to dog us down for decades, more paying the pensions of people who work for local authorities. Every time somebody's taken on by a bloated and more bloated council, you're not just paying for them today, you're paying for them for the rest of their life. It's an outrage.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I'm just looking at some figures here. You know, some of the areas, Croydon, for example, has signed off on a 15% council tax rise. We've covered this. And loads of councils are in tens of millions of pounds of debt. And we have got basic things like potholes, so right down to your lowest level, your potholes, the way that you drive your car, etc., the damage that's causing to people. From top to bottom, I think the public have a right, Mike, to say we are not getting value for our money. And the annoying thing is as well, Mike, when you look at some of the job titles here, people will be going, well, just vote them out. But you can't necessarily always vote out a managing director of a council, Mike.
No, Patrick, can I just tell you, there's no court of appeal for people who work for the local authorities. There is literally no court of appeal. You can't suddenly go to an ombudsman and say, I'm not being served properly, my bins aren't getting emptied. And do you know what happens? If sometimes through shame, some of these senior executives actually say, OK, I'm off, they normally, and that's in the report today, by the way, that we're talking about, they normally get a payoff of about £100,000. And within a couple of months, they turn up on some other council somewhere else in this country. Let's also remember that the reason why the park that you used to use as a child had a janitor was because the janitor wasn't paid very much, but he had a very sure and solid job. He got a pension for life after he stopped being the janitor. And that was the whole point of working for a public authority. You were safe for life. The thing is, they're now getting paid salaries which people in the private sector would kill for, but they have no responsibilities and they have no way of proving themselves wrong because it's always somebody else's fault. They employ so many.
Exactly. We're just losing you there, Mike, but it's all right. We've got the points across. It's Mike Parry there, who is a friend of the channel, of course, broadcaster, journalist, man of the people, and standing up for you as well there, really, isn't he? And another little angle as well that Mike, I think, may have come on to, which was about a lot of these people have second jobs. So quite often, if you drill down, not always, if you drill down into the people who are very high up on councils and some of these unelected roles as well, right at the top of them, they are on wedge. So 325 grand, £406,000. I'm just looking at some of the ones here now. Often, if you really look at some of their other lines of employment as well, they will be things like director of a hospital trust. And they'll have to actually do things like, attend 4 meetings at a hospital trust, for example. And they'll get about 100 grand for that as well, It's absolutely staggering, isn't it, really? So there you go. What do you make of all of this, people? All right, GBviews at gbnews.uk. Do you reckon that it is time to have a serious overhaul of council officials and their salaries? Are you getting value for money? I believe that I can now go, though, live to hear from our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who is talking in Northern Ireland to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. I think by the time that all this pageantry is over, it'll be the 26th anniversary, but let's go.
But my argument today is this. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement remains the best and only foundation for peace and prosperity. And if we can take inspiration and instruction from the way peace was achieved 25 years ago, we can fulfill the true promise enshrined in that agreement. The promise of stable, devolved government, a prosperous economy, and a more united society. That's the future for Northern Ireland we must build. Now, to do that, we must first ask why. Why did peace talks succeed in 1998, when so many had failed before? Now, I believe that's because people on all sides showed courage, imagination, and perseverance. First, those who worked for peace had the personal courage to keep going in spite of daily threats to them and their families, and the political courage to take risks in pursuit of a higher goal. John Hume, over his entire career, never relented.
OK, all right, so that's Rishi Sunak there in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, just passing comment on the 25th anniversary of that Good Friday Agreement and saying that it took tremendous courage to get that over the line where others had failed over the years, and that he's desperate, of course, to keep that going. So there we go. Right, look, I've got loads coming your way, and I want to let you know about some of the tub-thumping stuff I've got for you in the next hour. Can you believe that the Women's Institute is potentially going to let men into it? I mean, should this not be a sacred place? As you can see on the bottom of your screen there, 56,000 more migrants. That's the government's own prediction that actually broke right here on this show. Is this sustainable? What happens now? I want to know from you. Do you think it's time that we turned the boats back? Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon. Just gone 4 p.m. Big breaking news for us. The government figures have just dropped on the amount of people they are expecting to cross the English Channel this year. 56,000 small boats crossings. That could also mean that we are going to end up with 140,000 people in accommodation. Is this now sustainable? I suspect not. In other news, yes, that's right. We're going to be talking about this, a GB News exclusive, OK? Is the lottery funding extremist groups? I'll explain why very shortly. And in other news, aren't Just Stop Oil terrorists? OK, I'm going to be talking to one of their members. I'm going to be just going by the Crown Prosecution Service definition of what terrorism is, and we'll see what they make of all of that. And finally, a bit of light relief. Sausage rolls are causing crime. Yes, you heard. I will tell you why Greggs sausage rolls have been accused of being right on the cusp of causing a deep-seated crime wave. Oh, you won't believe this. All right, Patrick Christys on GB News. Right, two lots for your emails today. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I want your take on the latest numbers that have just dropped. They've been essentially forced out in court, actually, to get these numbers from the government. 56,000 anticipated channel crossings this year, up to 140,000 people in hotels and other accommodation by the end of this year. Is it sustainable? Is it not? What do we do about it? OK? And the other one I want to hear from you on is Just Stop Oil, as we're expecting another wave of protests from them. Do you think that they should be classified as a terrorist group? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, though, headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. In the last hour, our headlines are telling us a Home Office lawyer has told a court the government is preparing for 56,000 people to arrive in the UK by small boats this year. That's up from nearly 46,000 in 2022. The Home Office is currently accommodating 109,000 asylum seekers, 48,000 of those in hotels, at a cost of £6.2 million every day. If the estimate is accurate, that'll take the total number of migrants supported by the taxpayer to between 120 and 140,000. We'll be keeping tabs on that story for you throughout the rest of the afternoon. Meanwhile, the government's plans for an asylum centre in Essex are being challenged in the High Court today. Braintree District Council argues that the proposed site at RAF Weathershield is unsuitable due to its isolated location and lack of local services. The government says disused military bases to accommodate migrants will reduce reliance on hotels. The Prime Minister has declared the shares that his wife holds in a childcare agency in a much-delayed list of ministerial interests. He's under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog over claims he didn't properly declare Akshata Murthy's shareholding in Kuru Kids, which stands to benefit from measures outlined in the recent budget. Downing Street claims no rules were broken because Rishi Sunak declared the matter as a ministerial interest rather than to MPs in the Commons. Well, before today, the ministerial list hasn't been published for almost a year. Food prices have risen to a 45-year high, putting further pressure on families struggling with the rising cost of living. Inflation has defied predictions by remaining above 10%, largely because of the soaring price of essential goods such as bread, milk and eggs, along with clothes and shoes, which have only been partly offset by cheaper energy. It makes another interest rate rise from the Bank of England next month even more likely. A cabinet minister is warning that Russian hackers are seeking to disrupt or destroy parts of the UK's critical national infrastructure. Oliver Dowden's confirmed the National Cyber Security Centre is issuing an official threat notice and unveiled new measures to support businesses. He says more needs to be done to attract cyber security experts into the civil service.
We have experienced attempted attacks in the past, but these groups operate differently. Instead of seeking to profit or spy on us, their primary motive is to disrupt or destroy our infrastructure. These adversaries are ideologically motivated rather than financially motivated. They're often not controlled by those foreign states. That makes them more opportunistic and less likely to show restraint.
An inquest has ruled the death of a doctor after his AstraZeneca COVID jab was due to unintended complications of the vaccine. 32-year-old Stephen Wright was an NHS psychologist in South East London. He died from a blood clot to the brain 10 days after his first dose of the vaccine in January 2021. Coroner Andrew Harris described it as a very unusual and deeply tragic case. And Labour is accusing the government of denying justice to victims of the infected blood scandal. Between 1970 and 1991, thousands of people were infected with HIV and hepatitis after being given contaminated blood products. In an interim report, the chair of the inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, recommended that reparations should be extended to include bereaved parents and children. Cabinet Office Minister Jeremy Quinn told the Commons the government is considering the recommendations. But Richard Warwick, a victim of the scandal, told GB News he was expecting much more from the government statement.
but we ended up with a 35-minute statement of which 3/4 of which was just filled with platitudes about how wonderful the government had been, patting themselves on the back for the interim payments from last year for victims and spouses of the deceased. It was just everything that we didn't want to hear. Again, they're just kicking the can down the road as the victims are continuing to die.
The Unite Union has announced fresh strikes by health workers next month. 2,000 ambulance workers in the south of England and the West Midlands will walk out on May the 2nd, with Unite indicating many of its members are unhappy with the government's latest pay offer. The unions previously announced separate strikes for May the 1st in London and Yorkshire. Those coincide with a 48-hour strike held by the Royal College of Nursing. And lastly, the supermarket giant Tesco says it plans to appeal after Lidl won a High Court battle over branding. Lidl argued Tesco's use of a yellow circle in its club card scheme promotion was an infringement of their main store logo. A judge found in favour of Lidl, agreeing it was a violation of their trademark rights and copyright. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Loads on. Let's get cracking with some news that we broke in the last hour, which leaves Rishi Sunak's pledge to stop the boats looking rather shaky. A government lawyer has revealed to a court that the government is expecting a surge in small boat arrivals this year. The Home Office is preparing for 56,000 people to arrive across the Channel in 2023. That would be a year-on-year rise of around 10,000. The lawyer also revealed the Home Office is currently accommodating 109,000 asylum seekers. 48,000 of these are in hotels, which are costing more than £6 million a day to the taxpayer. This year's anticipated surge will take the population being supported to between 120 and 140,000. And this, of course, comes as a court battle is raging and the government is trying to create a national emergency, which would allow them, despite legal action or residents' complaints, etc., to plough ahead and use government-owned sites, military bases, former prisons, to house people, despite complaints from the local community. Let's get some more analysis now from GB News' Home and Security editor, Mark White, who is outside the Royal Courts of Justice. Mark, massive revelation this today.
Yeah, and it would appear to be a pretty embarrassing contradiction, given that the Prime Minister is very publicly declaring that he will stop the small boats, and yet the government lawyers arguing the case of why we should have large-scale asylum accommodation centres in former RAF bases like Wethersfield in Essex, is saying quite markedly that they are predicting, the officials at the Home Office, that there will be 11,000 more people arriving this year than arrived last year. 56,000 people arriving in small boats across the English Channel. And that really gives an indication of just how vital this court case is for the government in terms of trying to steer a way forward in terms of where on earth they accommodate these people, because in the figures that you were outlining there, they're going to be looking at 120 to 140,000 supported accommodation places required in the year ahead. They've said that 48,000 people are currently being housed in hundreds of hotels across the country. Well, if you take that figure of 56,000, even just looking at these bases where they want to put many more asylum seekers than, say, would be housed in a hotel, between 1,500 and 2,000 asylum seekers in these specialist accommodation centres. Well, even with that figure, you would need between 30 and 35 of these big accommodation centres just to deal with the 56,000 who are coming across this year. That doesn't even begin to address the issue of what to do to reduce the fact that 48,000 people are currently in hundreds of hotels across the country.
Yeah, look, absolutely, Mark. I mean, it is, like I said before, shocking revelations out of the court today, and an apparent contradiction in terms as well, it must be said. And this national emergency claim as well, just refresh us. Exactly what would this mean for the people who we're talking to in Wethersfield? And I've got some people on very shortly, actually, who are very, very concerned about this. It would just mean that despite them saying, look, it's going to ruin our economy, there could be public health and safety concerns, there could be just general infrastructure concerns, the government goes, no, national emergency, we're doing this.
Yes, well, the very reason we got these very stark figures set out in the way they have been in the court behind me, Patrick, is because the government is presenting this case for a national emergency declaration. The fact that things are so serious that now these planning objections that could be relied on by councils in a bid to try to stop the development at former RAF Wethersfield, upper RAF Scampton. Well, the government just needs to declare this a national emergency for that effectively to be accepted by the courts. And then they have this rule under Class Q, it's described as, that allows them to ignore the objections of local planners, and as long as it's on government land, Crown property, likes of a Ministry of Defence base, then there is pretty much nothing that a local authority can do about this, despite Braintree District Council, other objectors to other accommodation centres across the country we've heard about, saying that these centres are just not suitable because the places that they're putting them are by and large in rural areas where there just isn't the infrastructure in the wider area around these accommodation centres. Because it would be one thing if this was a detention centre where no one was allowed to leave. The fact is, it's an asylum seeker accommodation centre, so people will have the right to leave anytime they want, to go into the local community to do whatever they want. And of course, understandably, people in local communities around the likes of the RAF Wethersfield base are very concerned at the prospect of hundreds of young men, because let's face it, they will be young men, they won't be women or children in these centres. They're very concerned about the potential for trouble, for harm. The vast majority may be good, law-abiding citizens. It only takes a few to be very disruptive to a local community.
OK, Mark, thank you very much. Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor outside the Royal Court of Justice. He did give us that big breaking line at the top, which is about these migrant figures. And he was relating there to a site at RAF Wethersfield. And it is there that we go now, because Suella Braverman is planning to use RAF Wethersfield to house asylum seekers and is being challenged by Essex Council in the High Court. Joining me now is Tony Clark-Holland, who is the Deputy Chair of the Fields Association, which is campaigning against the use of Wethersfield Airfield to house asylum seekers. Look, thank you very much for joining me. I'm just reading here. As part of the council's legal proceedings, the Home Office confirmed to the judge hearing the case that they will not move asylum seekers onto Wethersfield Airfield until a time after the court hearing, and will only do so if they succeed in defending their position. It looks to me as though they've created a, quote, national emergency in order to plonk a load of asylum seekers in your town.
Well, that's exactly what's happened. I mean, obviously, one of the arguments that we had and that Braintree District Council put forward that they can't use Class Q to circumnavigate the planning scenario. And of course, funnily enough, the day before the court hearing, the government have come out and said there's a national emergency, which just sort of smacks of trying to back up and support their own position.
Well, then I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute. 109,000 asylum seekers currently in supported accommodation, as yet none where you are. 48,000 in hotels. I'm not sure whether or not a hotel is being used in your area. Actively preparing for 56,000 more channel crossings this year. We know that only 13% of asylum applications, and this, by the way, is bonkers, are processed within the first couple of years, 13%. They are expecting up to 140,000 asylum seekers to be in accommodation by the end of this year. Some people would say there is a national emergency, and with a heavy heart, you have to do your bit.
Well, we had a similar conversation a few weeks back. The national emergency has suddenly appeared, has been created. It's 4 years in the making. And I think, as some of your reports have been saying recently, we didn't used to have this problem. The processing happened really, really quite quickly. So part of the question is right back at the government, how has this even occurred? Why is this a national emergency? On the point of, so actually, why don't they put their efforts and hustle a bit on getting the processing done and back under control? Because even if they got this through in Wethersfield, Bexhill, and there is a list of 35, 40, centres that they're planning to do, which is why this judgment is so important. But if they put the same amount of effort and energy into the processing, we might be having this conversation. As far as doing our bit, that's not a problem. Everyone's happy to do their bit. But when you've got a small village of 700 people, 1,700, 2,000, 3,000, whatever it goes up to, is not doing your bit. I mean, that's complete saturation, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is absolutely. And look, I've got to be honest with you now. It does look a bit to me as though the human rights of the people in your area are coming second to the human rights of people who may well be plonked there. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's a justifiable statement, and certainly some of the local community feel that way as well. And part of that has come about purely through the lack of consultation from the Home Office. Again, we come back to this scenario where, and we had this conversation with our local MP as well, which was around what sort of state is the country in where local residents and the local authority has to go to court, to the High Court, just to have a conversation with the Home Office about the pros and cons of this being an acceptable place.
And to then essentially be told, and to then, with respect, essentially to be told that, yes, we've heard your concerns, but we don't care, we're doing anyway. It's a national emergency. Look, Tony, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Good luck to you. Tony Clark-Holland there, Deputy Chairperson at the Fields Association. So that is in Wethersfield, which is one of the areas that is relevant at this court case that's taking place today. And it's only because they've gone to court today that we now have these numbers about the amount of people they're expecting in accommodation like this. And it does appear, doesn't it, to be at direct odds with this policy to, quote, stop the boats. And again, I just want to emphasise, get a load of this figure. The Home Office has decided just 13% of asylum claims lodged by migrants who arrived in small boats since the beginning of 2018. So just 13% of those people. So think about all of the people that are coming through. So when we hear now that, again, that these sites that are being commandeered by the state in order to put asylum seekers in at the expense of the local people, in terms of their emotional expense, as it were, well, actually, these people are not going anywhere anytime soon, are they? They might be moved around, dotted across the country, but it's not going to be a high turnover, because unless we have the staff to actually process these claims, then they're not going anywhere. In Bexhill, though, in East Sussex, locals are planning to stage another protest this evening in opposition to plans to house 1,200 migrants in their town. And we are off to Bexhill now because Jeff is a local resident, and I believe Jeff joins me. Jeff, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you are well. How do you respond to the latest stark figures, by the way? Around 140,000 people going to be in accommodation, a little bit like the one I can see behind you there, and we're in a national emergency. How do you respond to all of these figures?
Yeah, the national emergency put out by Home Office is just a way of getting around planning. It's pretty sad to think that democracy is at stake here, that if the government is allowed to invoke an emergency on this, what next? What will it invoke an emergency decision on next? You know, we simply cannot keep going on like this, just sort of blundering from one chaotic situation to another. Why is it an emergency? They've known about it for 7 years. It's been going on since 2015, and suddenly, they're all surprised. Well, why are they surprised? You know, why haven't they been doing something? You know, an oversight on Westminster's part shouldn't be an emergency on Bexhill's part.
Well, I think it's not so much a national emergency, which it is. It's potentially a national emergency of the government's own making, by the way. But it's definitely a local emergency for you, isn't it?
Very, very local, very, very local. And it's very personal. Bexhill used to be like Sussex's best kept secret. It's a seaside town, keeps itself to itself, it's very conservative with a big and small C, and now suddenly there's going to be an influx of 1,200 people with no real backup here. So it's just the most unsuitable site. It's derelict. Don't look at the government pictures that show it in pristine condition. It's not in pristine condition by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to take an age to actually make this habitable. And on humanitarian grounds, you can't put anyone in there. You simply can't put anyone in there. So it's the wrong place, it's the wrong time. And by doing this, by having these sites, if you like, going up, it takes the pressure off the government from actually addressing it. So it'll be this one this week, it'll be another one next week, which it has to be to get up to the amount that we need. So every week, a little bit of pressure is taken off the government from actually dealing with it. So this is not the solution.
Jeff, we are playing footage now of not the old slick PR pictures from the government, but actually quite clear visual imagery about how derelict it looks. I think everyone can see that's not really fit for human habitation. Jeff, what is the main complaint for you guys, apart from the obvious, which is the amount of people that are being dumped there? I mean, could this site have been used for something else? Was there planning developments in place? Was there an economic development in place? Was there a bit of that going on?
Yeah, I mean, every council has a development policy, and we have a local development plan that runs until, I think, don't quote me on this now, although you will, 2028. So it's got 5 more years to run on the local development policy. So it's already been assessed by elected people. The council are elected, and we've got councillors that are elected. Elections are coming up soon. So there's already a plan in place that's been signed off and agreed by everybody, and now suddenly there's an emergency, and all the democracy that goes behind those plans is just brushed to one side.
Jeff?
It's pretty undemocratic.
Just quickly, Jeff, very quickly now. I've always wanted to ask someone like you. You say that area is conservative with a big and a small C. Who the heck do you vote for at the next election?
Well, it's a real big thing, and it's the most horrible feeling to feel abandoned by your MP. And I've never been on a campaign or a protest before in my life, not even as a student. But when you feel that you've been let down by your MP or abandoned, then you've got to go out. So I don't know. I don't know who to vote for. I may even put myself up. Heaven forbid.
Put yourself up. Well, you heard it here first. Jeff, thank you very, very much. Great stuff. Jeff there, who is a Bexhill local resident. Now, some breaking news for you. OK, so the Senior Civil Service Union, the FDA, is to ballot its members over strike action. I'll read that one more time. Some breaking news for you. The Senior Civil Service Union, the FDA, is to ballot its members over strike action. So there we go. That's the breaking line there. Now, GB News has exclusively revealed that lottery money was given to an activist group that hosted a talk calling Boris Johnson and other politicians devils. And on top of that as well, it appeared to not be condemning violence against police officers. Lottery money. Really? Is it going to extremists? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Yeah, before I get stuck into this, just a quick throw ahead to something that we've got coming up, which is I'm going to be talking to a Just Stop Oil activist. I was quite keen to delve into whether or not they are actual terrorist organisation. OK, I'm going to throw the CPS definition of what a terrorist organisation is or a terrorist group and just see if they think it matches up and see what their views are on that. But a GB News investigation has found that the National Lottery Heritage Fund has given £250,000 to an activist group that hosted a talk calling various politicians devils and much worse. We did have exclusive footage of activist Stafford Scott making the comments at a meeting in Brixton in South London a little earlier on this month. But, of course, there is an excerpt that we're going to play, which is from a report by GB News' investigative reporter Charlie Peters, who joins me now in the studio. Charlie, you've got some updates for us, I believe.
Yes, so since we've looked through the speech, 3 hours long, Stafford Scott described both Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, as a devil. He described Sophie Linden, the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, also as a devil. And the Mayor's Office of Policing and Crime were also described collectively as devils. So a very extensive line of attack there. He also described the Equalities and Human Rights Commission as being a kind of allies of the Tories that had been used to hang Jeremy Corbyn. He also said the Conservatives, Mr Scott said the Conservatives don't give a damn about black kids. He went on further to say that the government's plans to crack down on gangs was modern-day fascism. So an extremely controversial and political speech. And further, at the top of the speech, he actually discusses the 1985 Broadwater Farm riots. Now, the event he was hosting was under this title of 81 Acts of Exuberant Defiance, which was to commemorate the 1981 Brixton riots. In relation to that, he spoke about the 1985 riots, where PC Keith Blakelock was sadly murdered, and Stafford Scott, the Speaker, said that this murder being unsolved, some of us, he said, could see that as justice. We have a clip for you now.
There's nobody in prison for the death of that police officer who on that estate from 1985, and some of us believe that that's justice, because when they kill us, nobody goes to prison for that.
Can I just ask, so why did this happen? Why was this guy giving a speech like this at an event?
£250,000 was given to the Ubelia Initiative, an African diaspora-led community group who hosted this 81 Acts of Exuberant Defiance. June 2021, they were given the money, so 40 years after the Brixton riots, to commemorate it. And as a part of their events, they hired this speaker, this controversial anti-police speaker, using lottery money that ordinary people pay into to support good causes and hopefully win a few bob.
But, I mean, surely there's got to be some investigation into this, because with respect, Charlie, I mean, if this is if this is the kind of thing that money is being spent on, the National Lottery money is being spent on, I mean, goodness knows what else is being spent on.
Well, precisely. I mean, this is the first one I looked into, and I have to say it threw up quite a few shockers.
Just the first one?
Just the first one I've looked into, and it's threw up quite a few already. Now, I reached out to the National Lottery Heritage Fund yesterday, and they said that they had had a chat with the Ubelia initiative, just that they would advise them on how to continue to deliver the project. So they were standing by them. We have a statement there where they said that they would be explaining how the project would be delivered within their funding agreement of £250,000. However, I don't think they were aware of this issue with this, the description of justice for the brutal murder of PC Blakelock. I mean, PC Blakelock was found with a 6-inch blade buried to the hilt in his neck. He sustained over 40 injuries by machetes and similar other items. It was a brutal murder. And to describe it as justice due to it being unsolved is, of course, an extremely controversial statement. And I've reached out to the Heritage Fund with an update with this, and I look forward to hearing back from them.
Yeah, we all do. Charlie, thank you very much. Another stellar showing from you there, GB News investigator reporter Charlie Peters. I mean, look, the questions are obvious here, aren't they? Which is, what else? What else is being funded with National Lottery money? I mean, good grief. You do wonder where some of the money for other causes is going as well. It wasn't so long ago on this show, I was reporting, wasn't I, about Prevent Scheme money being sent to a group that actually was quite happy that the Taliban had taken over Afghanistan again. I mean, the mind absolutely, completely and utterly boggles, doesn't it? And then, as well, the audacity for a report to come out and say, oh, well, the Prevent Scheme itself might be Islamophobic. I mean, I'm sorry, have you seen where we're giving some of the money to? Just bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. Loads more still to come, though, between now and 5 o'clock. Now, as Just Stop Oil promised to keep protesting, I am going to ask one of their activists, are they terrorists? Because I've got the definition of what a terrorist is and what a terrorist group is, and I just want to know what they make of it. I suspect they won't care one way or the other. That is their right, of course. But it might be interesting to know, though. And we will look at why food prices are increasing at the fastest rate for 45 years. It is a good time to go on a diet, people. But first, it's your latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. A Home Office lawyer has told a court the government is estimating and preparing for 56,000 people to arrive in the UK by small boats this year. That's up from nearly 46,000 in 2022. The Home Office is currently accommodating 109,000 asylum seekers, 48,000 of which are in hotels at a cost of £6.2 million per day. If the estimate is accurate, that will take the total number of migrants supported by the taxpayer to between 120 and 140,000. The Prime Minister has declared the shares his wife holds in a childcare agency in a much-delayed list of ministerial interests. He's under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Committee over claims he didn't properly declare Akshata Murthy's shareholding in Kuru Kids, which stands to benefit from measures outlined in the recent budget. Downing Street claims no rules were broken because Rishi Sunak declared it as a ministerial interest rather than to MPs in the Commons. And food prices have risen to a 45-year high, putting pressure on family budgets. Inflation has defied predictions by remaining above 10%, largely because of the soaring price of essential items such as bread, milk and eggs, along with clothes and shoes, which have only been partly offset by cheaper energy. Analysts say it makes another interest rate rise from the Bank of England next month more likely. And the Unite Union has announced fresh strikes by the health workers next month. 2,000 ambulance workers in the south of England and the West Midlands will walk out on May the 2nd, with the Unite Union saying its members are unhappy with the government's latest pay offer. The union previously announced separate strikes for May the 1st in London and Yorkshire, which will coincide with a 48-hour strike by members of the Royal College of Nursing. And supermarket giant Tesco says it plans to appeal after Lidl won a High Court battle over branding. Lidl argued Tesco's use of a yellow circle on its club card was an infringement of their main logo. A judge found in favour of Lidl, agreeing it was a violation of their trademark rights and copyright. I did some breaking news to bring you that's come in the last few moments. 2 teenagers have been charged with murder in a shooting at an Alabama birthday party that left 4 dead and 32 wounded on Saturday. A 16-year-old and 17-year-old were arrested and charged with 4 counts of reckless murder. More on that story in half an hour.
Yes, welcome back. Now, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is set to crack down on the reckless behaviour of eco-protesters, vowing to bring in tougher laws to stop them ruining great British sporting events. Now, activists have disrupted the World Snooker Championship and the Grand National in the last few days. It was more of the animal lot, though, wasn't it, the Grand National, to be fair? And they've threatened Sunday's London Marathon as well. So here is what happened when our very own Jacob Rees-Mogg interviewed Just Stop Oil spokesman Sean Irish on GB News yesterday evening.
We are looking at what the climate crisis is a red light for humanity. Jacob, will you be joining us on the 24th of April at 1 p.m. for a march to end new oil and gas from Parliament Square?
No, of course I won't, because I want my constituents to have warm homes.
Climate crisis.
I want them to have warm homes and have economic prosperity.
We are already seeing crops burning in the field, Jacob, but it only gets us so far, Jacob.
This crisis isn't there. It's invented.
By whom? Who is benefiting?
You.
By me personally, yes, Jacob.
You are part of a system that wishes to frighten people into having a lower standard of living. I don't know.
OK, so, look, that was obviously an interview. You can see a fuller version of that online, by the way, if you are interested. But look, joining me now is Just Stop Oil spokesperson. It's Alex de Koning, and I believe he is there now. Alex, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on, although I'm not sure about the topic. I thought I was on here talking about the climate crisis. I'm a climate scientist. You speak so much about it.
Yeah,
Just Stop Oil.
absolutely, and indeed you were on, and no doubt you will expertly steer the conversation that way anyway. But I do want to just put something to you, if that's all right, and get your views on it, because a lot of people are really interested in this, as well as what you've got to say about the climate, OK? So, the Terrorism Act 2000 defines terrorism both inside and outside of the UK as the use or threat of one or more of the actions listed below, which I will go on to, OK? And where they are designated to influence the government or an international governmental organisation or to intimidate the public. So these include the use or threat must also be for the purpose of advancing political, religious, racial or ideological causes. Here are some of them that I think stand out for me about Just Stop Oil, potentially. Serious damage to property, endangering a person's life or creating a serious risk to the health or safety of the public or a section of the public. When we have a look at the definition of terrorism there, is Just Stop Oil a terrorist group? Are you a terrorist?
Of course not. I cannot believe we're still having this debate. Just Stop Oil is made of ordinary people, climate scientists, teachers, nurses, and pensioners. How on earth could you ever associate
criminal damage
people like that?
Serious damage to property. Yeah.
Hoover table, they hoovered up the pane of glass on the Van Gogh painting.
There's been groups such as yourself who have been responsible for smashing windows, causing serious criminal damage. When I look at the public's health and safety as well, blocking ambulances, you say you didn't, but you do. OK, that's damaging people's health, isn't it?
We've never
we've got a clip of it here. We've got a clip on the screen. I've got a clip right now on the screen.
Ambulance through the roadblock. That was in Knightsbridge, wasn't it?
I've got a clip on the screen right now of ambulances struggling to get through. And it's not the only one that we've seen, of course. And we had someone, unfortunately, who died waiting on a motorway for you guys. Is that not endangering a person's life other than that of the person committing the action, yourselves? And it is for an ideological cause. And crucially, you are looking to influence the government. That is the definition of terrorism, is it not?
So strikers are also terrorists, is that what you're saying? Doctors who go on strike.
Not necessarily, because our strikers.
Definition. Okay, look, the International Energy Agency say that we need no new oil and gas, otherwise we face an unlivable future. The International Governmental Panel for Climate Change say the exact same thing. So does the UN. So does every other political party say no new oil.
They say that, but does that legitimise you behaving in a way which, as far as I can see, would fit in with the definition of terrorism?
Oh my God, I cannot believe I am having this conversation. I am telling you that if we do not take proper action on the climate crisis then we are facing an unlivable future, as it is put in by the IPCC report. And you were saying, does that justify blocking a road or throwing soup on a Van Gogh painting?
No, what I'm saying is, does it justify serious damage to property, endangering a person's life, or creating a serious risk to the health or safety of the public? And that is before, by the way, we've got onto the economic harm as well. So I am concerned, and more for you than anything else. If the government is looking to crack down on you, before you know it, you might find yourself being done for a terror offence. But not just you, because this is the important bit, I think, maybe for people who are thinking of getting involved with Just Stop Oil. It is important to note that in order to be convicted of a terrorism offence, a person doesn't actually have to commit what could be considered a terrorist attack. Planning, assisting, or even collecting information on how to commit acts are all crimes under the British terrorism legislation. So you may well have people now who are helping you out to do your thing who could fall foul of this if the government decides to take firm action.
You really believe any of this? Come on. Look, and what's happening is our government, they've been paid £3.5 million by climate change deniers and fossil fuel lobbyists in order to keep pumping fossil fuels out, right? It's as simple as that. You can find that online very easily from The Guardian and a bunch of other sources. And we know that the more fossil fuels we have that are being burnt, the more people die from air pollution, the more people die from wildfires, from droughts. Look, I don't know about you, but food security, I think, is incredibly important right now. Our crops are dying because of droughts.
If we do what you want...
They were on fire. I don't know how many times I have to repeat that before it sticks with you.
If we do what you want exactly to the letter right now, people will die because energy will go off, they won't have heating, and there won't be enough food supply. If we just stopped oil right now...
oil in reserve. We say no new oil. How do you not understand this, Patrick? We had a really lovely conversation yesterday. And I clearly explained.
So the same government...
years of oil left, which is more than enough time to make a fair transition to renewables, which are 9 times cheaper. Why do you not want cleaner air? Why do you not want lower energy bills?
Is there not a fatal flaw in your argument, which is that you clearly have absolutely no faith or like for this government, which is fair enough. You are not alone in that for a variety of different issues, OK? But what you are saying and suggesting is that any government of this country, you would trust them to just stop oil right now, use our reserves, and then sort the situation out in the course of that 8 years. You would have no faith in them to do that, would you? So what you have to admit, therefore, is that we are going to have a crisis, whether or not it's now or in 8 years' time.
Patrick, it's not hard to do. We could be switching to renewable energies in a matter of months. The biggest solar panel farm in the UK was built in 6 weeks. Why aren't we switching? No, I don't trust this government, and neither should we. But our actions will end as soon as the government make a meaningful statement to end new oil and gas.
I've got a feeling, though, that your actions...
they should just end new oil and gas. It's much simpler for everybody, and it will lead to better lives and better economy.
The thing is, the government is trying to do, it says anyway, is trying to do everything that it possibly can in the shortest period of time, in a way that also balances the needs of the people that there are at the moment. And with respect, for a lot of members of Just Stop Oil, the needs of the ordinary person might not actually apply to people like yourselves. There are a lot of people who come from incredibly well-off backgrounds and are retired.
Your net worth is in the millions.
My net worth is in the millions. Oh, good grief. Well, I'll tell you what, that is incredible news to both me and my non-existent accountant, may I say. Look, how would you, if you are designated a terror group, would you continue to do it anyway?
We're not. I cannot believe we're being asked these sort of questions.
Well, I'm asking it to you. You know what? Can I just say? No. Can I just say? How dare you cause massive inconvenience to millions of people? Cause people to potentially at times die in the back of their cars on the way to hospital, miss doctor's appointments for chemotherapy, and things like that, to cause huge economic damage to us, and then sit on this show and say, throw your hands in the air and be exasperated that I'm asking you to justify your actions. Where do you get off? Can you understand? Could you understand why some people actually think that there is a lot of self-entitled brattery that goes on with Just Stop Oil, and that turns people off your cause?
Patrick, look, I really empathise with anybody who's been disrupted. I genuinely do. Under normal circumstances, this is completely horrible, and anybody who's doing it would be in the wrong. But these are not normal circumstances, Patrick. These are not normal circumstances.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Now, I wonder whether or not you guys are going to be placed with banning orders, for example, for things like sporting events. So, like football hooliganism. Okay, football hooligans can be placed with banning orders that ban them from going in certain areas at certain times, for example. And presumably this is just around the corner for Just Stop Oil, is it not? And that, if it does mean that happens, which I can't see why on earth the government wouldn't do this, given that you're announcing what you're going to be doing and where you're going to be doing it and when you're going to be doing it. If that does happen, because of your actions, you would now not be allowed to protest in the way that you want to. Whereas if you just behaved more reasonably, you probably could have had a longer go at it.
Oh, I wish you said the same thing to the suffragettes. Maybe women might not have had the vote. You are not the suffragettes. I wish you said the same thing to the civil rights movement. Oh, if only we'd thought of maybe just going on marches, or only if we thought of signing petitions. I wish we did that.
Do you honestly see yourself, when you look in the mirror, do you see a modern-day suffragette?
No, I don't. But we're really trying to use the tactics that we think work the best. And history has shown that these tactics work the best.
In what way? No, go on. Just rattle off some examples. Because with respect, the suffragettes did not cause anything like the mass level of economic issues that you guys have caused. They did not cause. With respect, I don't really recall that happening at all. And also as well, I mean, the suffragettes stopped when they got what they wanted, right? And you guys are not.
We will happily stop as soon as the government
But what the suffragettes wanted was quite easy to do. Should have been done a long time ago. I think we can all agree that was quite easy to do, and did not have a massive, monumental impact, hugely, or negatively so, in the short term, on the way that we all live our lives at a great cost to not just this country, but potentially the world as well. So there are key distinctions there between yourselves and the suffragettes, aren't there?
This is easy to do, okay? The IPCC report has clearly laid out the pathway that we can stop new oil and gas and that we can transition away. 700 of the top UK scientists wrote to the government that we need no new oil and gas. I don't know if that sounds familiar, but that's actually our demand in Just Stop Oil. The High Court has deemed our government unlawful for breaking its own climate change targets. They're completely betraying us. So if you really expect us to just sign a petition and go home, then we're not going to do that, obviously. We're literally talking about millions of people dying in the global south, in countries like Africa from drought, and 33 million people in Pakistan. And you really think that it's justified to just write a petition, go on a march?
OK. All right, Alex, look, thank you very much for your time. As ever, Alex Saccone there, who's a Just Stop Oil activist. Right, get in touch on the back of that, GBViews at GBnews.uk. I'm going to bring you some breaking news, I believe, and there are more strikes on the way. Oh, good stuff. The Unite Union has announced that security officers at Heathrow Airport will take a further 8 days of strike action next month in a dispute over pay. Met Police say that people buying a sausage roll after 11 p.m. in central London could cause crime and disorder as well. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we
get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, the latest inflation figures show the rate fell to 10.1% last month, down slightly from 10.4% in February. Reacting to the figures, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says that these numbers reaffirm what the government must continue to do in order to ease pressure on families and businesses.
Well, this is a small headline fall, but it disguises a large rise in food inflation, which is causing pressure to families up and down the country as they see their cost of their weekly food shop go up. And it shows that there is no such thing as an automatic fall in the headline rate of inflation. That's why we have a plan, and if we're going to reduce that pressure on families, it's absolutely essential that we stick to that plan and we see it through so that we halve inflation this year, as the Prime Minister has promised.
Our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, joins me now with On the Money. Take it away, Liam.
Big disappointment for the government, this, Patrick. We've been reporting on it since 7 a.m. This morning. Inflation only came down to 10.1% from 10.4% in February. It was widely expected again to go into single digits. The fact it isn't in single digits means that interest rate rises are now more likely. We've just got a few graphics to go through. There it is. It's 10.1%, the headline rate of inflation there in March 2023. And if we break down the last few months, it was up at 11.1% back in October, and then it went all the way down to 10.1% in March. So months and months and months of double-digit inflation. Next slide. Why is it happening? You've got high housing costs, housing services costs. That includes utilities, 26.6% higher prices there than March 2023. And food prices, we talked about this yesterday, didn't we?
Yeah.
Up 19.1%. This is not a UK phenomenon. In Germany, food price inflation is 20% plus. And it strikes me that this is the really politically sensitive issue because the poor, less well-off families pay so much more disproportionately for their food than the rest of us as a share of their income. And look at that food price inflation, Patrick, compared to that. This graph for GB News TV viewers, listeners, I'll talk you through it. This is wholesale food prices around the world since last April. They are down by 19.9%, and yet the retail food prices being shouldered by shoppers in the supermarkets are up 19.9%. And do you remember those graphics I showed you yesterday, the supermarkets? I've got them back here.
Hey.
Now, these aren't official numbers. These are numbers from the Which consumer survey of 8 supermarkets surveys, 26,000 different goods. You've just seen there that wholesale food prices are down 20% around the world, and yet the slight cost of a loaf of bread at Asda up 67% on the year to March. Ocado porridge oats up 66%. Tesco 8 sausages up 73%. So there you have it, the contrast between falling wholesale prices and rising retail prices for food. Now, the food retailers will say there are lags. You know, farmers' costs a year ago when they were planting crops and so on were much, much higher. But still, I think that's politically really explosive. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if ministers started to talk publicly about the need for big food retailers to start dropping prices.
How do you get them to actually do it, though?
It's very, very difficult. You've got to threaten them, you've got to shame them. And look, they would say there's no wrongdoing. Those supermarkets there, they would say it's a competitive environment. They're selling food that was produced some time ago, etc., etc. But look, that's going to be a big political battle. The fact that we've got still high inflation is going to impact the local elections, I think. The fact that we're probably now going to have at least one more interest rate rise where previously, it would seem that interest rates were going to peak. Mortgage holders won't like that. Savers think that is at least one good thing for them. But there is a ray of hope. I want to leave you with a ray of hope. The first ray of hope is that motor fuel prices in March 2023 were actually about 5% lower than in March 2022. Petrol down more than diesel, of course, and I think that reduction will continue. But this is what I want to point out finally. This is the producer price index. This is the cost of goods and services that firms, the cost of inputs that firms need to produce the goods and services they sell us. In February 2023, producer price inflation, which feeds into consumer price inflation, was 12.8%. In March, it was sharply down, 7.6%. Ministers will be clinging on to that number tonight, hoping that that is a sort of harbinger, if you like. That is a sign that in the months to come, inflation will start to fall sharply.
You are finishing with a wonderful ray of hope, and I would expect nothing less from Liam Hannigan, our economics and business editor. Thank you very much, Liam. Great stuff. That. OK, right. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's end the hour with some breaking news. Again, SNP MSP Colin Beattie will step down as the party's treasurer after he was arrested in connection with the police investigation into the party's finances. That news has just dropped. More on that after this very, very short interlude. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we, of course, are Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade, Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, everybody. It's just gone 5 o'clock. I'm Patrick Christys. I'll be with you for the next hour, and what an hour it is. Big breaking news for you about the amount of Channel migrants the government is anticipating this year. 56,000. That could mean that 140,000 people will be in government accommodation in the next year. It's hardly stopping the boats, is it? Is it time to turn them back? In other news, though, a GB News exclusive has revealed that lottery funding to the tune of £250,000 has potentially gone to a cause that possibly, anyway, does actually promote extremism. I'll be going into the specifics of that very shortly. But concerning stuff, where else is the money going to? That's what I want to know. And yes, in other news, the Women's Institute is going to actually welcome men for the first time. In a way, there's more to that story than meets the eye. And as well, we are going to be finishing, of course, with quite a concerning story that's coming out of a school. The latest in bad race relations. Can it possibly be true? Can it possibly be true that an interfaith war is brewing? At one school, Muslim pupils reportedly made Hindu pupils convert to Islam, otherwise they would be violently bullied. Is multiculturalism working in Britain? Patrick Christys on GB News. Loads to go out there. GBViews at gbnews.uk. What do you make of those latest migrant numbers? It is very concerning stuff. How on earth are we going to stop the boats? And, of course, as well, I want to know your take on whether or not you think that the WI, the Women's Institute, should let transgender women in. Do you think so? Isn't the clue in the first part of the name there? Anyway, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Now, headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening to you. The top story is a breaking news story we can bring to you concerning events in Scotland. MSP Colin Beattie has said he's stepping back as SNP Treasurer and from Holyrood's Public Audit Committee until a police investigation is concluded. That comes after he was arrested in connection with a police investigation into the party's finances. Mr Beattie is the second person to have been questioned by detectives who are trying to establish how more than £600,000 in donations set aside for an independence referendum have been used up. He'd been arrested on Tuesday before being released without charge pending further investigation. We'll bring you more on that as that story develops. Now, in other news today, the Prime Minister is urging unionists in Northern Ireland to return to Stormont, saying restoring devolved institutions is the best path forward. Rishi Sunak was speaking alongside other world leaders in Belfast to mark 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement was signed. Former US President Bill Clinton said it's time to get this show on the road. Mr Sunak also praised the courage of those involved as more powerful than 1,000 bombs or bullets and said those today should inspire to nothing less.
We need to create a more stable, devolved government in Northern Ireland. And that means getting the institutions up and running. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement left us an extraordinary and precious legacy. When we look back in 25 years from now, surely we should aspire for our legacy to be nothing less than this, that the institutions have been up and running for every single year.
Rishi Sunak. Now, a Home Office lawyer has told a court the government's preparing for 56,000 people to arrive in the UK by small boats this year. That's up from nearly 46,000 in 2022. The Home Office is currently accommodating 109,000 asylum seekers. 48,000 of those are in hotels at a cost of £6.2 million each day. If the government estimate is accurate, that'll take the total number of migrants supported by the taxpayer to between 120 and 140,000. And the Prime Minister has declared the shares that his wife holds in a childcare agency in a much-delayed list of ministerial interests. He's under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog over claims he didn't properly declare Akshata Murthy's shareholding in Kuru Kids, which stands to benefit from measures outlined in the recent budget. Downing Street claims no rules were broken because Rishi Sunak declared the matter as a ministerial interest rather than to MPs in the Commons. Before today, though, the ministerial list hasn't been published for almost a year. An inquest has ruled the death of a doctor after his AstraZeneca COVID jab was due to unintended complications of the vaccine. 32-year-old Stephen Wright was an NHS psychologist in southeast London. He died from a blood clot to the brain 10 days after his first dose of the vaccine in January 2021. Coroner Andrew Harris described it as a very unusual and deeply tragic case. And staying with medical news, Labour is accusing the government of denying justice to victims of the infected blood scandal. Between 1970 and 1991, thousands of people were infected with HIV and hepatitis after being given contaminated blood products. In an interim report, the chair of the inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, recommended that reparations should be extended to include bereaved parents and children. Cabinet Office Minister Jeremy Quinn told the Commons the government is considering the recommendations. But Richard Warwick, a victim of the scandal, told GB News he was expecting more from the government statement.
But we ended up with a 35-minute statement of which three-quarters of which was just filled with platitudes about how wonderful the government had been, patting themselves on the back for the interim payments from last year for victims and spouses of the deceased. It was just everything that we didn't want to hear. Again, they're just kicking the can down the road as the victims are continuing to die.
Now, the Scottish Government is saying it has no option other than to take legal action against UK ministers and their bloc on the Gender Recognition Bill. The legislation in Scotland aims to make it easier for people in Scotland to change their legally recognised gender. Laws Westminster have challenged. MSPs voted in December last year to pass the controversial Gender Recognition Bill by 86 votes to 39. The Unite Union has announced fresh strikes by health workers next month. 2,000 ambulance workers in the south of England and the West Midlands will walk out on May the 2nd, with the Unite Union indicating many of its members are unhappy with the government's latest pay offer. The union's previously announced separate strikes for May the 1st in London and Yorkshire, which will coincide with a 48-hour strike held by the Royal College of Nursing. And lastly, the supermarket giant Tesco says it plans to appeal after Lidl won a High Court battle over branding. Lidl argued Tesco's use of a yellow circle on its club card was an infringement of their main store logo. A judge found in favour of Lidl, agreeing it was a violation of their trademark rights and copyright. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
I want to start this hour by showing you a picture. And it's the Prime Minister standing in front of a lectern showing one of his key pledges: stop the boats. Well, that pledge is looking impossible before the next election after the new figures brought to you right here on GB News, big breaking news at the top of the show. A government lawyer has revealed to a court that the government is expecting a surge in small boat arrivals this year. The Home Office is preparing for 56,000 people to arrive across the Channel in 2023. That would be a year-on-year rise of around 10,000. So it's not stop the boats, is it? It's more boats. The lawyer also revealed the Home Office is currently accommodating 109,000 asylum seekers. So we were all wondering, I think, weren't we? How many asylum seekers are we looking after and how many are in hotels? Well, I'll tell you, 48,000 of them apparently are in hotels, costing more than £6 million a day. And this year's anticipated surge will take the population being supported to between 120,000 and 140,000. Cop a load of this, though. This is a story that dropped yesterday. The Home Office has decided only 13% of asylum claims lodged by migrants who arrived in small boats since the beginning of 2018. So how long is it going to take for us to process and get through all of these people? Well, given the large influx that's expected, the government is turning to old military bases to house asylum seekers. We know about all of this, don't they? They claim that hotels are overflowing, that it's too expensive. And we've been doing a lot here as a channel about the historic RAF Scampton site, which is being prepared for use as accommodation. It's despite local opposition. And some other sites as well were taking the government to court, which is why today, thanks to our Home and Security editor Mark White being at the court, we could bring you that breaking news and those breaking figures, OK? But these sites, such as RAF Scampton, for example, the government will have powers, if it does invoke a national emergency, to essentially run roughshod over campaign groups, over local people who are saying, look, this can't be good economically, and also over local people's human rights fears. I am joined now by Sarah Carter, who is a campaigner with the RAF Scampton Action Group. Sarah, thank you very much. Are you now even less hopeful than you were of getting this site stopped? Because the government says, you know what I'm going to do, instead of listening to you, I'm going to create a national emergency, and you're going to have to just suck it up.
No, we have to hope that they're going to come to their senses, basically. Wethersfield have been in court today, and the verdict's been hopefully shared with us on Friday. So we shall find out then sort of whether things are looking to go in our favour.
Do you feel as though that the government is just trying to do everything it can, though, to not listen to residents like you? We only found out, didn't we, late yesterday, that they were going to try and tart this up as a national emergency, even though it's been one for a very long period of time.
Well, yeah, sorry, a lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on our part, I believe. Yeah, this has been an ongoing problem for a long time, and to not even consult people that, you know, whose lives they're going to affect is abhorrent.
And what kind of impact will it have on you?
Well, I mean, as one of the spearheads for the campaign, I'm getting messages every day from residents. We live on the former Maori quarters. We couldn't get any closer to this proposed asylum centre, and people are worried. I get messages every day that people aren't sleeping. It's affecting their mental health. Their anxiety is through the roof, and I can appreciate, you know, what they're going through. But again, our voices don't seem to matter at all.
The issue that I would suggest you're going to have next, Sarah, as I'm sure you've already thought about, is a fundamental lack of trust of the government. Stand up, stop the boats, stop the boats, stop the boats. We care about this. Bear in mind that reportedly it's only today that the government has removed welcome signs for illegal immigrants at Dover. So it's hardly a shock, is it, that we've had people queuing up. The Welsh Labour government are planning to give them £1,600 a month, which is more than double the state pension. I mean, is it any wonder? Is it any wonder when you look at all of this? But when you look at the anticipated rise in the amount of people who we are set to welcome into Britain, and areas like yourselves at Scampton over the course of this year, and you also look at the fact that we are only processing around 13% of them every 5 years, Sarah, how long is it before they extend RAF Scampton and you actually end up with more than you're being told about?
Well, I mean, the original figure was 1,500. That soon changed within a matter of days to 2,000. So, you know, it's a big area. But the sad thing is that we have this amazing investment potential that we could possibly lose in the time that it takes to fight this. So, you know, we can't give up the fight, because we need to try and save our heritage here, and we will do everything that we can to sort of work with West Lindsey District Council to try and get this stopped.
What lengths are you willing to go to, Sarah?
I can't say on national television, I'm afraid.
Oof.
I'll be incriminated in myself.
Oh, grief. Well, I tell you what, there you go. Well, we will have to wait and see, won't we? But no doubt we'll be talking to you as and when anything does happen. But hopefully, of course, it doesn't all come to this, and you are still hoping very much so that this gets blocked. Look, I do just have to ask you, we are in a national emergency. That national emergency has been self-created, and the figures for the next year or so are utterly stark. So they are going to have to go somewhere. And with respect, Sarah, you know, there is a military base there. Why can't you guys do your bit? Why would it have to be, I don't know, you know, people in the Wirral who were worried about having a barge off their coast, or people in Maidenhead who've already got nearly 2.5 or 2 3/4 of these migrant hotels that are there, because apparently another one's popping up soon. What do you make of all of that?
It'd be a completely different conversation that we were having if we didn't have this £300 million investment on the table. 1,000 jobs, bringing in money, you know. Yeah, I can't stress it.
Sarah, let me just say, let me make it quite, just one last one with you, if that's all right. Is it fair to say that everyone in your area is going to be actively poorer as a result of this site potentially being used, do you think?
People have already been checking their house prices and have seen that there has been a marked decline. Whether that's just would have happened anyway, we don't know. But 1,000 jobs would have been created with the new regeneration scheme, and hotels, you know, it would have brought more money, tourists. Yeah, we are going to be poorer.
All right. Well, look, Sarah, I really appreciate your time. I do hope to speak to you again. Hopefully you get the result that you want going forward, but, well, we'll see, eh? But Sarah Carter there, of course, who is the campaigner with the RAF Scampton Action Group. And look, one of the other big ones for us today has been in Bexhill. So Bexhill, alongside Wethersfield, have been in court today, and this is why we were able to bring to you live here on GB News the latest round of government figures. Very quick recap on that. There are currently 109,000 asylum seekers in supported accommodation, 48,000 of those in hotels. The government is actively preparing, this is Stop the Boats Britain, by the way, actively preparing for 56,000 channel crossings this year. We've already had around 5,000, so another 51,000. They're expecting that to mean that around 140,000 people will be in accommodation ahead of this year, so by the end of this year, all right? We're going to Bexhill now, where locals are planning to stage another protest in around an hour, I believe, an hour and a half, in opposition to plans to house 1,200 migrants in their town. I'm very pleased to be joined now by Bexhill resident Bridget Peters, who is attending the protest later. Bridget, thank you very, very much. Just tell me why you're out protesting them.
Thank you for having me. Yes, so we are protesting because we feel this site where I'm standing on now is unsuitable for 1,200 male immigrants who will be descending on us come September. Bexhill is house a lot of elderly people, young children, and especially on this estate. I live 4 doors away from the actual gate to the entrance. So it is a very, very worrying time for all of us, not just North Eye Estate, not just Little Common, but Bexhill as a whole.
Bridget, how do you feel about the fact that the government, because you guys have taken them to court, are now saying this is a national emergency and they don't have to listen to you?
Well, I think that is wholly unacceptable, because I will tell you in no uncertain terms, I was aware of this last year. Exactly a year ago, an employee from the UAE called me to one side and told me that the site had been sold, and 1,200 male migrants will be coming and settling down at the site. So that was exactly a year ago last year.
And Bridget, do you fear that it's going to be many more than 1,200, because the government is expecting 10,000 more channel crossings than we had last year, and we are, according to reports, only processing 13% of channel migrants every 5 years. So I would suggest, Bridget, that your area there is going to see rather a lot more people than the amount that you're being told about.
Yes, 100%. And as I said already, on a previous interview, Bexhill does not have the infrastructure. We are a small little town, and we are neighboured by 5 care homes just a quarter of a mile away from the prison site. We have 3 primary schools, 2 secondary schools and a college. So the scenery of this town is going to change dramatically.
And your fears, Bridget, are about your local economy and local public health and safety. I just spoke to an individual from near the RAF Scampton site earlier. I want to know whether or not you've seen any economic impact already. How are the house prices doing where you are?
Well, to be brutally honest with you, I live 4 doors away. I'm not holding out much hope for my house price. To be fair, I'd say my house price is worth £1.
You would expect someone now to only pay £1 for your house because it's just next door to this proposed migrant centre?
Exactly.
How does that make you feel?
Well, very, very disheartened. Money isn't everything. However, my late husband and I worked extremely hard. I am an immigrant myself from South Africa, and we came over in the legal way. We've paid whatever fees we had to 20 years ago. We've bought a house down the North Eye estate, and unfortunately, I feel that his blood, sweat and tears and everybody else's is down the tubes, because where can we go? Where do we go and get a decent property?
Bridget, thank you very, very much for your time today, and I wish you all the best, and I hope to talk to you again very, very soon. Good luck to you. It's Bridget Peters there, who will be attending the protest in Bexhill later. I think there was rather a lot there, wasn't there, really, from Bridget? Right, OK, moving on. GB News has exclusively revealed that lottery money was given to an activist group that hosted a talk calling Boris Johnson and other politicians devils and appearing to, well, how do I put this, not necessarily condemn violence against police. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, the National Lottery is famous for supporting good causes, but a GB News investigation has revealed that the National Lottery Heritage Fund has been used to support political causes, including a speech that described Conservative politicians as devils. Charlie Peters has this exclusive report.
What would you do with 6-figure lottery winnings? It's a question lots of Britons dream about answering, but for a collection of activists, that dream became a reality in 2021 when the National Lottery Heritage Fund awarded almost £250,000 to a group called 81 Acts of Exuberance Defiance. The social change project was launched with support from campaign group the Ubele Initiative to mark the 1981 Brixton riots. The money has helped the group put on 81 different events, which call on people to resist the whitening of our history. But GB News can reveal that some of the lottery funding has gone towards supporting a political speech by an activist, breaching the fund's rules. Campaigner Stafford Scott gave a talk at a Brixton venue earlier this month, which accused the royal family of being involved in slavery. He slammed the Met as a gang executing black kids and said the government's crackdown on gangs was fascism. Scott used his lottery-funded talk to describe Boris Johnson and other politicians as devils.
And this man, this devil, you know Mopac, right? You need to know them my devil is they are devils, and I'm going to show you that they're devils. This woman's called Sophie Linden. She's the Deputy Mayor for Policing. Right now, right, she a devil.
Tory MP Brendan Clark-Smith said that lottery funding should not be used to promote political causes.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? I think when people play the lottery, they want to see that money go into good causes, and a lot of it does, of course, and we want to see that spent in our communities properly. What we don't want to see it being used for is these political causes, things that actually cause more tension in the community, and I think that's why it's really, really important not just to look at the applications, but the organisations as well, to make sure that this doesn't happen in future.
The National Lottery Heritage Fund said they do not define heritage. They leave it up to applicants to make their own understanding of what it is. Do you think that this talk that was funded £4,000 counts as heritage?
Well, heritage can mean a lot of things, as we've said there, but I don't think many people would call this heritage at all. And as I said, we want that money to be spent properly. I think a lot of people feel very let down, certainly seeing some of the comments that have been made and where that money is going. But I think this is a wider problem that we've got here. I mean, we have charities, we have community interest companies that really are vehicles for some quite nasty political views. And this is not really where money should be going. It's not in the spirit of the sector. And I think something needs to be done about it.
A National Lottery Heritage Fund spokesperson said that its funding should not be used to promote political beliefs, adding that it had been in touch with the Ubele Initiative to discuss how the project would be delivered. They say that your odds of winning the lottery are 1 in 45 million. But it seems that the chances of your £1 going towards funding political activists is much higher. Charlie Peters, GB News, Brixton.
OK, so there we go. Rather a lot to take in there from Charlie. Now, in the last hour, we did show you another clip of Stafford Scott in which he discussed the unsolved murder of PC Keith Blakelock back in 1985 and said the fact his killer had not been found could be considered justice. Let's just watch this again.
There's nobody in prison for the death of that police officer who on that estate from 1985, and some of us believe that that's justice, because when they kill us, nobody goes to prison for that.
All right. OK, so I am joined in the studio now by Ken Hines, who is the chair of the Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group. Look, Ken, thank you very much for coming in. People, I think justifiably, will be concerned that £250,000 worth of National Lottery funding has gone towards a group that has a speaker who, well, it appears to me, doesn't condemn violence against police.
No, look, I know Umbrella, the group who's got the money. They're doing some amazing work in the black community. And the fact of the matter is they're actually dealing with grassroots group. And I'm not surprised that they've reached out to people like Stafford, because Stafford's got a long history of doing work within the black community, between black youngsters in Tottenham. And he's a hero to many of those young people.
Is he not telling them there, though, that politicians are devils and the police are all racist? And what good does that do?
But Patrick, like I've said, I don't think you could ever spend a day in a black man's shoes to understand where Stafford is coming from. Stafford is quite clearly being traumatised by decades of repeatedly being a victim of the police interaction. I know personally his family has been tasered. I know personally that he was involved in Mark Duggan, Winston Silcock, a lot of these undesirable cases that the white society may feel that, that the people are tainted. And they're not, because in the black community, if people like Stafford didn't stand up, people like Winston will probably be still in jail now.
So what is the key difference, right, between when my Irish grandfather first came over, for example, and there was no blacks, no Irish, no dogs outside boarding houses, and there was massive racial abuse directed towards them? If my granddad had received £250,000 in lottery funding and gone and done a PowerPoint presentation saying that all politicians are devils and that the unsolved murder of a police officer was justice for the Irish community, do you think that would have been acceptable?
I can say this much, that Stafford didn't get that £250,000. It was sent to an organisation, and Stafford was just the speaker. Stafford's putting across his point, and as harsh as it may seem to you, as I said, he's a hero to many in the black community, and he continues to be a hero. And I said, I look at him as a brother, and as a brother, we may not always see eye to eye, but the simple fact is we must continue the good fight and not look at each other and try to marginalise one another.
What is the good fight there, then? Because if I was just having looked at that from the outside, right, the takeaway that I got from it would be if there were young black people in that audience, which no doubt there were, that your politicians hate you and the police are racist and it's OK to hurt them.
Not at all. I think he was saying there's element. Now, again, and what bears that out? Look at the Casey report. Look at the Scarman report, the McPherson report. We can go through report after report that says about institutionalised racism. And let me tell you this, institutionalised racism is just not with the police, it's around society. And I'm saying you're sitting in a chair here, giving your perspective, because you've got their hands on the trigger, as opposed to what gets put out there, what narratives get put out there. And trust me, the narrative that's put out there is not balanced, it's not fair. So people like Stafford's got every right to speak his mind as he sees fit, because, as I said, he has been a victim to police brutality over a number of years.
What would you say, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, what would you say if £250,000 worth of National Lottery funding had gone to someone who stood up and said that they had catastrophic experiences with authority figures who happen to be black? Would that be OK? Would you be angry about that?
Listen, I know that many black people in our community contribute to the lottery funding. So why shouldn't some of that funding go specifically to grassroots people and people like Stafford? Without Stafford, he's, as I said, I may not always agree with his politics or the way he may put across certain things, but you know what? That's his style.
It's important to say as well that you have known Stafford a while, right? And when you say a lot, he suffered a lot of trauma and things like that, I mean, to be fair, he has. hasn't he? What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Like I said, he's been one of the people that was brought on suspicion around Keith Blakelock's murder. He's been fighting for all those people that has been charged with the murder of PC Blakelock. He has actually been arrested a number of times. Most recently, his older brother has been tasered in his own home by the police. Not coming for him, but coming for on another matter. But nonetheless, so he's been involved. He's been one of the prime movers and shakers for the Mark Duggan situation. He's been there for the young man who got Jordan Walker-Brown, who got tasered by the police and now is paraplegic. So I'm saying it's a lot of trauma that he has dealt with. And with personally, I've dealt with trauma, but at least I've got support from groups called a Band of Brothers, where I'm able to look at my where that's coming from and to realise that I can't solve it by myself, but I need to reach out and ask for support.
Do you think it would be helpful for society if every single person in the black community thought exactly the way that Stafford does, or would it be worse for society?
I would have thought if we all thought in one way, we'd be robots. And it's so healthy that I can sit here and have that conversation. Yeah. But you might bring another 5-6 person. They might have different opinion. But would you be comfortable in sitting with another 5-6 different shade of opinion around the same topic? I don't think so. I think you may be intimidated at somewhere along the line because you might think you're sitting here plush, but I couldn't see no security.
All right, mate.
I couldn't see no security sitting here. By the time that they move,
why would I need it?
What I can say, in some cases, people are carrying harm, carrying hurt, and they can be volatile.
Do you think that that's all right?
I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating violence to you, Pat, because I love you like food.
Listen, tell you what. Listen, to you, right? But seriously, okay, all right. So I'm just going to pick up on that. Then is that not a bit of a problem, right? Because the way I would look at it, and I hope you would feel the same way, is that we're having a chat here. We talk fairly regularly, and we always end up talking about really controversial issues. So it's going to be a discussion like that. You know, is it right that there are, according to you, maybe decent elements of a certain community? You might get very angry with me having this conversation with them.
Yes, they will. I know.
But that's not right, is it?
They get angry with me because I've got an association with the police, that I have an interaction with the police. And in doing so, I put myself out in danger of being called an informer, of being called a police stooge. But all I'm trying to do is be that sponge to absorb the...
Would you get stick from certain elements, maybe, of the black community for coming on here and talking to me about this now?
Absolutely, because they said I should be here. Who am I to talk about any given subject? But I'm a person, I'm thick-skinned, and plus, you know, I'm a person that can take care of myself. And I come from a place called joy, and I want others to experience what that looks like, to be in the sun all the time.
Wow. Oh, great. I tell you what, this has been a fantastic interview. Look, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in. I'll chat to you soon. All right, take care. It's Ken Hines there, who is the chair of the Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group. Right, now, OK, we're moving on, people. We are moving on. I've got loads more coming your way, OK? We have had issues recently, anyway, and this has been at a school where students, apparently anyway, of the Hindu faith, found themselves the targets of bullying and, believe it or not, racial discrimination in classrooms, but not for the reason that you might think. The report by the Henry Jackson Society says that some Muslim pupils are telling their Hindu classmates to change religion in order to make their lives easier. Wow. Fighting between Muslims and Hindus broke out in Leicester last September, which the report highlighted is, quote, fuelling discrimination and tensions in schools. To discuss this further, I am joined by England's first Muslim MP, Khalid Mahmood. Khalid, thank you very much. What's going on here? I mean, this does appear to be, dare I say it, maybe another example of societal issues, frankly, from some other societies and cultures now playing out on the streets of Britain. What's going on?
Well, look, excuse the bell. It's the House of Commons. There's a vote.
I did wonder. It was a bit early for last orders.
We're OK for a while, so we should be OK. Yeah, look, there are issues here. There are issues that have been played out because of the issues on the subcontinent, particularly that was started last summer in Leicester. And I think we have to be aware of what has happened in relation to that. And I think the report that we're talking about today from the Henry Jackson Society actually makes it worse and I think it's playing into that trap of identifying people in a separate way. The issue of
Can I just ask you on that, Khaled? Sorry, can I just cut in on that? Is that all right? Because, again, I want to emphasise the reason, in case you're wondering, people, why you can hear a bell, is because Khaled's in the House of Commons, and that is a signal to go and vote on something. But, Khaled, you seem to say there that this report has made it worse. Now, with respect, I've heard this kind of language before about stuff. I've heard this kind of language with the grooming gang situation. I've heard this kind of language with a lot of stuff, where it's the reporting of the facts that is to blame and not the issue itself.
There's no facts here, and that's what I want to come back to. Okay. That's why I say that.
Go on, elaborate on that then.
The issue here is the way the survey is done. The survey was past a certain amount of Hindu temples, and anonymously people returned the survey. We don't know who was engaged, who was involved, and how it was done. It was only about 800 people, I believe, that replied to this. And that is no way to do a scientific report which actually has a proper basis and a proper discussion around it. And I think, therefore, what this does is serves to provide a further divide. What we've done and what people in Leicester have done, I've spoken to key imams and key people in Leicester who said that we want to move forward for what had happened. And if there is any form of bullying, that should be addressed in schools. This question was sent to 1,000 schools, and hardly any of them replied because they didn't see it as an issue in the schools. So let's try and look at the issues that are there and see how we can resolve them and move together. Rather than dividing people, let's unite people.
OK, all right. And do you think that people in Britain should be concerned about, if we do continue to have high levels of multiculturalism and mass immigration, etc., which we obviously will do, that this may bring with it certain issues? So the reasoning behind this bullying in school, and again, I want to emphasise that what this report shows is that Muslim pupils were apparently telling Hindu pupils to convert to Islam, otherwise they would get bullied. And that is because they were saying that they were holding some of those Hindu pupils responsible for the actions of India, right? So it seemed to be a kind of Pakistani versus Indian, quotes unquote, issue here, but in Britain. How do we stop this from happening? Because, you know, we are in Britain. We've got to live together, and we don't want, you know, this drama coming with us, you know?
Absolutely not. I mean, I've got Hindu friends for over 40 years, families that I go to their events, and we share things at Eid and at Diwali and other events. I've got Sikh friends, and I've got all sorts of other friends as well. And that's what we should do to celebrate this. What I say is, if there's an issue in schools, the schools should be able to deal with that and report on that, and let's move forward. Sending a survey rather than to pupils in schools or parents of pupils who go in particular schools in particular areas and anonymizing that and sending to Hindu temple, that's what creates that division. So let's not do that, and let's treat people equally and say if there's an issue in the community, in those schools, just resolve it.
Just quickly, Khaled, just quickly, and be honest with me now. If I was reading a report to you that at a Christian school that happened to have Muslim pupils, which is not uncommon now these days here, that there had been reports that Muslim pupils had bacon thrown at them, because there's a report here that a Hindu girl has had beef thrown at her, for example, and that it was by a few Christian pupils who were saying that you've got to convert to Christianity or we're going to bully you. Do you think you'd be having the same conversation with me now?
Of course I would, Patrick. I just said to you, look, the issue here is simply this. Bullying is wrong, and it has to be addressed in a particular instance where it happens. What I'm arguing is the methodology of this report, and I don't agree with that, and I think that was slightly different to what it should have been. Had it been a bit more precise, perhaps we would have used that to get somewhere, and that didn't happen.
All right, look, Khaled, thank you very much. Much appreciated you coming on. Either you can go and vote now. I think you're late for a vote, so go and do your democratic duty. Khaled Mahmood there, who is England's first Muslim MP. Right, OK, so moving on. The Met Police says that people buying a sausage roll after 11 p.m. in central London could cause a massive upsurge in crime. You heard that right. A sausage roll in central London after 11 p.m. Massive upsurge in crime. I'll tell you why in a minute. I'm Patrick Christys on GBNews. We're Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. The takeaway food company Greggs is set for a battle with Westminster Council after I know which side I'm on, by the way, after the popular bakery was banned from selling late-night treats, including sausage rolls, from its flagship store in Leicester Square. After making its application to create a 24-hour store, Greggs was faced with objections from the Met, Westminster Council and Environmental Health. The police, believe it or not, actually argued that the West End location will become a hotspot for crime and disorder. Right? So to shed some more light on this, I'm now joined by the CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association and the appropriately named in this context, Michael Kill. Michael, would a 24-hour sausage roll boutique have become a magnet for crime?
Well, to be fair, it's surreal that we're having this conversation, isn't it? I mean, amongst all the challenges our sector has, we are literally talking about the sale of a sausage roll after 11 o'clock at a bakery, considering that that's going to see an elevated level of antisocial behaviour. And I understand some of the challenges for Westminster and the Met within those areas, but I don't think there is appropriate data at the moment to suggest that would be the reason for it, which is the concern.
But isn't this symptomatic of a much bigger issue, actually? I know I've been having a bit of a laugh about sausage rolls, but why on earth are we in the bustling metropolitan heartbeat of Britain's capital city? And by the way, it's not just a London story, this, because it will apply to your city, wherever you are as well. Even having a discussion about whether or not things should be 24-hour. It's a modern world. Get them cracking 24 hours. Get the economy moving. And if anyone decided to move in that area, by the way, it's their own fault. It's like people who move in next door to a pub and complain about the smoking area, isn't it?
Well, exactly. I mean, we've got to ask ourselves, what message is it sending to visitors coming into London, all those cities? As you can appreciate, in terms of the visitor economy, rely heavily, particularly London, on domestic and international nightlife tourism, as well as tourism across the board. If they understand that 11 o'clock is a cut-off, or that's the benchmark, it's really the wrong message that's being sent. And one thing that I think is really important is that we've got to understand that, you know, the government have literally cut off most of the support for our industry. So they've got to allow us the ability to trade further, to do more, to you know, remove barriers and restrictions. So I feel that this is a benchmark stand that really needs to be fought and pushed.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Look, thank you very, very much. And to be fair, you know, the government is saying that it would lead to a rise in violent crime around the area if Greggs is open. But at the price that you can get a Greggs sausage roll, that really is criminal. I hate myself. Right, thank you very much, CEO there of the Nighttime Ministries Association, Michael Kill. Just got time for one more. I've been talking about this a bit, haven't I? Another day, another row over gender ideology. The Women's Institute says it will continue to celebrate the lives of transgender members amid reports of an attempt to overturn its trans-inclusive policy. To shed some more light on this, I'm joined now by writer and commentator Jenny Holland. Jenny, thank you very, very much. I was quite surprised to learn, Jenny, initially, that there was a transgender policy on this, but I suspect, Jenny, that this has shot to prominence more now. The clue is in the name, Women's Institute. Should it not just be for biological women?
I would say so. I can also add that I am not shocked to hear that this is causing trouble within the Women's Institute, because it's causing trouble pretty much everywhere where women want to gather in any kind of privacy or women's only space. So why should they be exempt? I think that the trans issue is really facing a turning point at the moment where women are becoming somewhat more hard line in policing their boundaries and policing their spaces. And perhaps, I don't know anything about the internal workings of the WI, but perhaps that is what they are experiencing at the moment.
It's worth noting, Jenny, that you don't have to... I think a lot of people think that the WI is just exclusively for, you know, elderly women, right? Now, that's not the case. You don't have to be an old lady to join, which does mean that conceivably, under this policy, someone who was young, and so like me maybe, who decided to transition, but with everything intact, could then join a WI and have a room full of people like my actual grandma, who is a member of the WI and who loves it, and be in a room of very vulnerable people. And if you were inclined to be, well, I'll just say it, a sexual deviant, then that is, well, a bit grim for the people there, is it not?
Yeah. Look, I think when you're talking about the trans population, you're not talking about a single population. What often happens is that people in general who aren't paying close attention tend to conflate the trans identity with being gay. And that is not always the case. There is some overlap, but it's not. And if a gay woman wants to join the Women's Institute, of course, that is her, you know, her who she chooses to love in her private life is her own business, and that should never be a blockage to joining something like the Women's Institute, whether it's conservative or not. The trans thing is a lot more complex and a lot more multifaceted. I think that, you know, a lot of the pushback is coming because women are seeing gross violations, much more so than Women's Institute. Although I take your point and I agree with it about, you know, your granny who likes to bake cakes and knit baby blankets doesn't necessarily need to deal with this issue in her elderly years. I agree with you. But there's a lot worse things happening, for example, in women's prisons in the UK and in the Republic of Ireland and across the United States. As we all saw with Riley Gaines being forced to get undressed with an intact male who was then getting trophies for his participation, and so on and so on. So I think perhaps what women need to do is take a much harder line on this. Now, I did note from the petition that this group within the WI is putting forward, they're not calling for expulsion of current trans members. I don't know what their trans population is. They're not doing that. They're calling for a debate and a moratorium on accepting new members. And given the high levels of social contagion around this issue, I think that's eminently sensible and actually really quite necessary.
Jenny, thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. Jenny Holland there, writer, commentator on the old WI issue. Now, Michelle Dewberry joins me now, Dubes & Co.
God blimey, it's a minefield, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't it
This last hour has been hard work, I'll be honest with you.
Oh, has it?
Yeah.
I bet you get paid an absolute fortune, so you should be able to deal with it. I bet you don't get paid as much as some of these council bosses there.
Ridiculous.
Oh, goodness gracious me.
Why would become a
Eye-watering.
doctor or a lawyer? Just go and work in local council.
I mean, the thing is, though, people will be shouting at the screens when you see how much these guys get paid, which is fair enough, you know, reward, effort and all the rest of it. But then the experience that people get from the councils, you seem to be paying more and getting less, don't you? And I'll tell you what I want to look at tonight as well. And this is a fascinating story of a 3-year-old girl that was bit in the face by the family dog quite badly, and the mum kept the dog.
Yeah, I saw that. Weird.
Yeah.
Weird,
Well, what
weird.
do you think to that? If your dog bit your kid, would you get rid of the dog or even maybe the kid? I don't
luckily,
know.
I don't have to answer that, Juice, because I'm out of time. Michelle Dewberry up next. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 p.m. Peace out.
Hello. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office. My name's Alex Deakin, and if you like spring sunshine, you should enjoy tomorrow. It's going to be a bit chilly first thing, and we'll still have that easterly breeze. It's been with us for the past few days, thanks to high pressure sitting up to the north, allowing the easterly breeze to bring in cooler conditions, particularly along North Sea coasts. Further west in the sunshine, well, it's been fine today, and it will be again tomorrow. Overnight, still quite a bit of cloud initially this evening over Wales, Northern Ireland, southwest England, but that is edging away, so most places having lengthy clear spells, perhaps some misty conditions over the tops of the Pennines. Enough of a breeze to stop temperatures falling too far, but still it'll feel fairly fresh on Thursday morning with some pockets of frost possible across the hills and mountains of Scotland and northern England. But most towns and cities start about 5 or 6 tomorrow, and we start with plenty of sunshine too. Any mist and low cloud over the Pennines should clear away. The possibility of a bit of mist at times on the eastern side of Scotland, but generally a lot of blue sky around during Thursday. Come the afternoon, it will start to cloud over across East Anglia and the southeast with some outbreaks of rain perhaps pushing in here, but most places dry and bright. Again, that east-west contrast with the temperatures, 11 or 12 at best in the east, whereas further west, 15, 16, maybe 17, 18 in western Scotland, feeling fairly pleasant once more here. Staying fine and clear